The phone's harsh ring jolted me from feverish sleep. 2:38 a.m. My thermometer had read 102 degrees earlier that evening. COVID had ravaged my body for days, leaving me barely able to breathe without coughing. The room spun as I fumbled for my phone. Hello? My voice cracked, throat feeling like sandpaper. Leonora. My boss Genevieve's voice sliced through the line with surgical precision. No concern for my health. No preamble. You're fired. Your projects and office space are reassigned. Goodbye. The words should have devastated me. 3 years of dedication, countless all-nighters, innovative campaigns that transformed the company, all discarded in a middle-of-the-night call while I was battling an illness that had killed millions. But instead, a strange calm washed over me. Okay, I replied simply. A pause. What do you mean, okay? Confusion had replaced her confident tone. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh that triggered a coughing fit. What's so funny? She demanded. Through labored breathing, I managed to respond. Nothing, Genevieve. You just don't realize what you've done. Are you threatening me? Her voice pitched higher. Not at all, just observing. Goodbye, Genevieve. I hung up, still smiling despite my fever. The projects she'd just claimed, the ones she thought would advance her career, were actually elaborate traps she had unwittingly set for herself. And she had just stepped right into them. If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. That moment when someone you trusted reveals their true colors. Stay with me as this story unfolds. I promise the ending will be worth every minute of your time. If you're enjoying these true stories of justice served, take a second to like and subscribe so you never miss our next upload. My name is Leonora Devereaux. Before that nighttime call, I was the associate creative director at one of the top marketing firms in the country. I had built a reputation for developing unconventional campaigns that connected with audiences on a visceral level. My work had won awards and brought in millions for our clients. What I lacked in corporate politics skills, I made up for with raw creative talent. Let me take you back to how it all began. 3 years earlier, I'd arrived at the firm fresh from a smaller agency, buzzing with ideas and the drive to make them reality. Genevieve Weston had personally recruited me, gushing about my portfolio and promising I'd have creative freedom to push boundaries. Your campaigns speak to people in ways others can't achieve, she told me during our first meeting. That's what we need here. For the first 6 months, she was my biggest cheerleader. She'd showcase my concepts to clients, nodding enthusiastically as I explained my vision. The leadership team seemed impressed, and I felt I'd found my professional home. Then came the Ashton account, a struggling luxury watch brand needing reinvention. I developed a campaign focusing on time as a witness to life's most intimate moments rather than a status symbol. It was risky, emotional, and nothing like their previous marketing. The campaign launched. Sales increased by 42% in the first quarter. The industry took notice. Award nominations rolled in. That's when I first noticed the shift. During the celebration dinner, our CEO raised a glass to Genevieve's brilliant vision for Ashton. She stood, basking in applause. When I conceived this approach, I knew it would resonate with a younger demographic. I sat stunned, my congratulatory smile freezing on my face. Not once did she mention my name or contribution. Later that night, I confronted her outside the restaurant. I worked around the clock on that campaign, Genevieve. You didn't even acknowledge me. She adjusted her coat, not meeting my eyes. Don't be so sensitive, Leonora. This is how business works. We're a team. The important thing is the company succeeds. A team where you take all the credit? Her expression hardened. You're still new here. I've spent 15 years building my reputation. When you reach my level, you'll understand how this game is played. I should have left then, but the work challenged me. The pay was good, and the health insurance covered my mother's experimental cancer treatments. Without it, she'd have no options left. So I stayed, telling myself things would improve. They didn't. The pattern became clear. I'd develop strategies and concepts. Then Genevieve would mysteriously need a quick review just before presentations. She'd walk into meetings with my work, making tiny modifications and presenting it as her collaborative vision. Client success? Genevieve's strategic genius. Campaign failures? Leonora's execution missed the mark. My salary remained frozen while hers grew with each success. My success. Promotions that should have been mine went to others who played her political games better. Meanwhile, my ideas continued generating millions. I documented everything. Every email, every meeting, every concept. Not for revenge, just protection. Or so I told myself. Then came the breaking point. 12 months ago, our largest client threatened to leave unless we delivered revolutionary work. Genevieve called me into her office. "We need something no one's done before," she said, tension visible around her eyes. "The CEO specifically asked for you to lead this." I felt a flicker of vindication. Finally, recognition. "But," she continued, "I'll need to closely supervise. The stakes are too high for experiments." Translation: I would do the work. She would take the credit. I developed a campaign that broke every convention in the industry. It was personal, almost uncomfortably intimate, yet universal. The client loved it. Sales skyrocketed beyond projections. At the industry awards, Genevieve stood on stage accepting the top honor. "I've always believed in taking risks," she said, clutching the trophy. "This campaign represents everything I've worked toward in my career." My name appeared in small print on a slide that flashed for 3 seconds. That night, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to leave. That would be too easy for her. I wasn't going to complain. That would paint me as difficult. Instead, I decided to play a longer game. I began speaking up more in meetings, ensuring others heard my ideas firsthand. I built relationships with clients directly. I found ways to sign my work that couldn't be erased. Hidden creative elements that carried my signature-style clients began to recognize. Genevieve noticed. Her methods became more aggressive. 6 months ago, she assigned me 3 enormous client projects simultaneously, each with impossible deadlines. The message was clear: fail and prove you're not essential. Succeed and work yourself to exhaustion while she collected the praise. I accepted the challenge without complaint. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment. I poured everything into these projects, creating strategies that broke new ground. The clients were thrilled with the preliminary presentations. The plans were innovative, forward-thinking, and, if implemented exactly as written, subtly problematic. That's when I recognized her true game. These weren't just tough assignments. They were calculated snares. The strategies, if executed as she demanded, would skirt industry regulations in ways that wouldn't be obvious immediately but would create serious consequences months later. By then, she'd have ensured all evidence pointed to me as the responsible party. I quietly built alternative, completely legal versions of each campaign. I launched these clean versions while creating a paper trail showing Genevieve's explicit push for the problematic approaches. I saved emails where she insisted on pushing boundaries and being aggressive. I noted each time she removed protective measures or compliance steps I'd included. "We don't need all these disclaimers," she'd say, deleting sections of my work. "They dilute the message." I'd save both versions. When I fell ill with COVID, I worried my careful planning would unravel. I was bedridden, struggling to breathe, let alone work. But as days passed and my fever raged, I realized Genevieve might see my illness as an opportunity. With me absent, she could claim complete ownership of the successful campaigns while positioning me to take the fall when regulators eventually noticed the issues. I was right. 2 weeks into my illness, colleagues started acting strange during our video calls. Messages went unanswered. Projects were rerouted without explanation. Then came that middle-of-the-night call. As I lay in bed after hanging up, I felt an odd sense of peace despite my illness. I had prepared for this moment meticulously. Genevieve thought she was cutting me loose before I became a liability. In reality, she was walking into a trap of her own making. The next morning, between coughing fits, I sent 3 emails. The first went to our internal compliance team, expressing concerns about certain directives I'd received regarding the 3 major campaigns. The second went to the board of directors, detailing my contributions and attaching documentation of Genevieve's instructions to circumvent regulations. The third went to my personal lawyer, outlining potential wrongful termination and documenting the systematic credit theft I'd experienced. Then I waited, focusing on recovering my health. The COVID symptoms gradually subsided, leaving me weak but clear-headed. For days, silence from the company. I wondered if my evidence had been dismissed, if Genevieve's influence was too strong. A week after my firing, my phone rang. It was Preston, the head of the board. "Leonora, we need to talk." His voice was grave. My heart raced. Had my plan backfired? "We've reviewed your documentation," he continued, "and we've spoken with the clients directly. There are discrepancies between what we've been told and what actually happened." I said nothing, letting silence do the work. "The board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow. We'd like you to attend." I took a deep breath. I'm still recovering from COVID, Preston. The illness Genevieve knew about when she fired me at nearly 3 a.m. A heavy sigh from his end. "Yes, that's part of what we need to discuss. Can you join virtually?" "I'll be there." That night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Years of being overlooked, of having my work stolen, of being positioned as expendable. It was all coming to a head. The next morning, I logged into the video call 10 minutes early. One by one, serious faces populated my screen. Genevieve joined last, her expression confident until she saw me. "What is this?" she demanded. "Why is she here?" Preston cleared his throat. "Genevieve, please. We have serious matters to discuss." For the next hour, I watched as my careful documentation was presented. Emails where Genevieve explicitly pushed for questionable tactics. Recordings of meetings where she dismissed compliance concerns. Side-by-side comparisons of what she'd presented to the board versus what had actually been implemented. Most damning were the testimonials from clients, confirming I had been the creative force behind the campaigns, not Genevieve. Her face went from confident to confused to panicked as the evidence mounted. "This is ridiculous," she finally sputtered. "She's manipulating you. I've given 15 years to this company." Preston's expression remained stone cold. "And in those 15 years, how many others' work have you claimed as your own, Genevieve?" The question hung in the air. Genevieve's eyes darted around the screen, seeking allies and finding none. "We'll need your resignation by end of day," Preston continued. "The legal team will be in touch regarding the client complaints." "You can't do this," she whispered, but the fight had left her voice. After she disconnected, Preston turned to me. "Leonora, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. We failed in our oversight. We should have seen what was happening." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the victory surging through me. "We'd like to offer you Genevieve's position, effective immediately. Your work has been exceptional, and your integrity in implementing compliant campaigns despite pressure speaks volumes." The offer was everything I'd worked toward: recognition, power, vindication. But as I opened my mouth to accept, I hesitated. This was the moment I should feel triumph. Yet something felt incomplete. The company that had allowed this to happen for years was suddenly sorry, only after they feared legal repercussions. "I appreciate the offer, Preston," I said carefully, "but I need time to consider it. My priorities have shifted during my illness." His surprise was visible. "Of course. Take the time you need. The offer stands." After the call ended, I sat in silence, processing. The revenge I'd orchestrated had worked perfectly. Genevieve was exposed and removed. I was offered her position, yet I felt hollow. Was becoming the next Genevieve really what I wanted? Or was there something more important than climbing a corporate ladder built on taking credit for others' work? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How did it go, honey?" I looked at her message, thinking about how close I'd come to losing her, how the company's health insurance had saved her life, how precious time truly was. That's when I realized the best revenge wouldn't be taking Genevieve's job. It would be creating something entirely new, something that would make both Genevieve and the company irrelevant. I picked up my phone and called Preston back, but not to accept his offer. I had something much bigger in mind. "Preston," I said when he answered, "I've made my decision. But first, Let me tell you about an idea I've been developing. My plan wasn't just about justice for myself, it was about transforming an industry built on stealing credit and crushing creativity. I'm declining your offer, I told Preston. His sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. But I have a different proposition. Leonora, I understand you're upset, but this position comes with substantial... I don't want Genevieve's job, I interrupted. I want to change how this entire industry works. Over the next hour, I outlined my vision. A new agency model built on transparent attribution, fair compensation tied directly to revenue generation, and collaborative leadership. No more stolen ideas. No more hidden contributions. Our industry talks about innovation while clinging to a hierarchy designed in the 1950s, I explained. Clients are tired of paying premium rates for work done by underpaid juniors while executives take credit. Preston remained silent as I detailed my proposal. I would stay only if the board agreed to pilot my new division, one operating under completely different rules. Each team member would receive clear credit for their contributions, and compensation would be directly tied to the success of their work. You're essentially asking us to cannibalize our own business model, Preston finally said. I'm asking you to evolve before someone else makes you obsolete. The silence stretched until Preston sighed. Present it to the full board next week. I can't promise anything. That's all I ask. For the next 7 days, I poured my recovering energy into my presentation. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about creating something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. The board meeting arrived. 12 stern faces watched as I outlined my vision, complete with financial projections showing how transparency could actually increase profitability by improving talent retention and client trust. Miss Devereaux, said Imani, the oldest board member, while intriguing, your proposal undermines decades of established practice. With respect, I countered, those established practices are why we lose our best talent every 18 months. It's why clients grow suspicious of our billing. It's why Genevieve could steal credit for years without anyone noticing. That last point landed hard. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Give me 6 months to prove this model works? I pressed. A small team, 3 clients, complete autonomy. If I fail, you've lost little. If I succeed, you'll be positioned as industry pioneers. The debate lasted hours. Finally, Preston called for a vote. 7-5 in favor of my proposal. A narrow victory, but enough. Congratulations, Leonora, Preston said afterward. You have your division. Don't make us regret this. I smiled. I won't. This was my true revenge beginning to take shape. Not destroying Genevieve, but making her irrelevant. Creating something she could never have built because she was too busy stealing instead of innovating. Within weeks, I assembled a team of 5 people, all talented individuals who had left the industry disillusioned after experiences similar to mine. Together, we developed our operating principles and target client list. Our first prospective client was Delia, marketing director at a mid-sized tech company. She'd worked with traditional agencies for years and was notoriously demanding. Your model sounds idealistic, she said during our pitch, skepticism evident. But this industry runs on relationships and executive oversight. How can junior people possibly deliver without strict management? That assumption is exactly why agencies waste your money, I explained. The junior people already do the work. We're just removing the unnecessary layers that take credit and drive up costs. She leaned forward. Prove it. I'll give you our smallest product line. Show me results in 3 months. We accepted the challenge. Every team member took ownership of specific elements, their names clearly attached to their contributions. We established transparent pricing that showed exactly what each component cost and who was doing the work. Our first campaign launched 6 weeks later. The results were immediate. Engagement metrics 40% above Delia's targets. 2 weeks after that, she called, I need to meet. Today. My stomach tightened. Had something gone wrong? Had our experiment failed already? That afternoon, I sat across from Delia, trying to read her expression. I showed your model and results to my CEO, she began slowly. He had questions. I'm happy to address any concerns, I offered, preparing for criticism. His main question was, "Can you handle our entire brand portfolio?" I blinked, processing her words. "Your entire portfolio?" She nodded. "Your team delivered better results with half the budget of our main agency. More importantly, I always know exactly who's working on what and why decisions are made. No more mysterious charges or executives taking credit for junior work." This was it, our first major validation. And not just a client, but a significant one whose business would establish our division as viable. "We'd need to grow our team," I said, mind racing. "But yes, we can handle it." Delia smiled. "Good, because I've already recommended you to 2 other companies. They'll be calling this week." News travels fast in our industry. Within 2 months, we had 7 clients. By month 4, we'd grown to 15 team members. Our transparent model was resonating with clients tired of traditional agency games. The original board members who had voted against me watched in stunned silence as our division's revenue grew. Preston, to his credit, became our strongest advocate. "This is the future," he declared during a company-wide meeting, as I presented our division's results. "Leonora has shown us a better way forward." Seeing my name and contribution acknowledged publicly felt like water after years in the desert, but the true satisfaction came from watching my team receive the same recognition. Then came the industry conference, the same one where Genevieve had accepted an award for my work a year earlier. Our division was nominated for innovation in business practices. As I prepared my acceptance speech, ever optimistic, my assistant rushed in. "Leonora, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. On screen was an announcement. Genevieve had launched her own agency, claiming to pioneer a revolutionary, transparent model of credit and compensation. My blood boiled. Even now, she was stealing my ideas. I scrolled further, reading the details of her announcement. Her version was a pale imitation, surface-level transparency with the same old power structures beneath. She didn't understand the fundamental principles that made our model work because she'd never created anything herself. "Should we respond?" my assistant asked. I considered it for a moment, then handed back her phone. "No, the market will sort this out." That evening at the awards ceremony, I felt a familiar tension as they announced the innovation category. The spotlight landed on our table as they called our name. Standing at the podium, looking out at the industry that had nearly broken me, I felt a strange calm. "This award belongs to every person whose ideas were stolen," I began. "Every creative who watched someone else take credit for their work. Every junior who was told to wait their turn while their contributions powered someone else's promotion." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Our model works not because it's noble, but because it's honest. Talent flows to places where it's valued. Clients stay where they trust the process. It's simply better business. I spotted Genevieve in the crowd, her expression unreadable. To those attempting to copy our approach, transparency isn't a marketing tactic. It's a complete reinvention of how we work, reward, and create. You can't fake it. Our eyes met briefly across the room. She looked away first. After the ceremony, an industry reporter cornered me. "Rumor has it, Genevieve Weston started her company using your ideas again. Care to comment?" I smiled. "I'm focused on building something new, not reliving the past." "So you won't address her claims that she developed this model years ago but wasn't allowed to implement it at your former company?" I nearly laughed. The beautiful thing about our model is that every idea has clear documentation of its origin. The truth is easily verified. The reporter raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Meaning I wish her well, but authenticity matters. Clients can tell the difference." 6 months later, that prediction proved accurate. Genevieve's agency struggled to retain both clients and talent. Without the ability to take credit for others' work, her own capabilities were exposed as mediocre. 3 major clients left her within weeks of each other, citing execution issues. Meanwhile, our division had grown so successful that the board voted to transition the entire company to our model. The old guard resisted, of course. 2 executives resigned rather than operate with transparency. We wished them well and continued growing. 1 year after that midnight firing, I received an email that stopped me cold. "We should talk, G." Genevieve wanted a meeting. Against my team's advice, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location. She looked different, the polished exterior somewhat faded, her confidence dimmed. We ordered our drinks in awkward silence. "Your model is winning," she finally said, staring into her cup. "My agency is losing clients every month." I waited, letting her fill the silence. "I thought I could replicate what you built, but it's not working." She looked up. "I need your help." The audacity was breathtaking. After years of stealing my work, after firing me while I was seriously ill, she wanted my help? "Why would I do that?" I asked simply. "Because you're better than me," she admitted, the words clearly painful. "Not just creatively. You built something I can't figure out how to copy." I studied her face, searching for manipulation. I found only desperation. "You never understood what makes the model work?" I said. "It's not about the structure or the compensation formulas. It's about actually valuing people's contributions instead of seeing them as stepping stones for your advancement." She winced. "I can learn." "Can you? After 15 years of taking credit for others' work?" She had no answer for that. "Here's what I can offer," I said finally. "Not a partnership or collaboration, but advice. Start over. Close your agency. Take time to create something, anything, that's truly yours. Experience what it's like to build rather than take. Then, maybe, you'll understand why our model works." "That's your help? Telling me to quit?" "That's my honesty. Something you never gave me." She left shortly after, angry and humiliated. I felt no satisfaction watching her go, just a quiet certainty that I'd broken free from her influence entirely. 3 years have passed since that night Genevieve fired me. Our model has been adopted by a dozen other agencies. The industry publications that once celebrated her now feature case studies about our approach. I've been asked to speak at business schools about ethical leadership and innovation. Last month, I received a package. Inside was a small, independent magazine featuring a modest ad campaign for a local business. The creative director, Genevieve Weston. The work wasn't groundbreaking, but it was solid, authentic, and undeniably hers. Attached was a note. "You were right. I'm starting over. Building, not taking. Thank you." I keep that note in my desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the journey, from fevered and fired to founding a movement that changed an industry. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. It's building something so necessary that it makes the old ways obsolete. It's transforming your pain into progress that helps others avoid the same fate. Genevieve took my job, my credit, and nearly my health. In return, I created a new way of working that made her entire approach irrelevant. I didn't need to destroy her. I simply needed to build something better. She fired me at my lowest moment, thinking she was cutting me loose before I became a liability. Instead, she freed me to create something she could never have imagined, a system where people like her can no longer thrive by taking credit for others' brilliance. That's the sweetest revenge of all, using their betrayal as fuel to build something that ensures no one can ever do to others what they did to you. If you've ever had your work stolen or your contributions ignored, remember this. Your ideas have power, even when others try to claim them. Document everything. Build allies who see your value. And when the moment comes, whether through betrayal or opportunity, be ready to create something entirely new. Sometimes getting fired is just the universe telling you it's time to light your own path forward. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us share more stories of resilience and transformation. And leave a comment below if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal. I read every response and draw strength from this community's experiences. Remember, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. Thanks for staying with me until the end. I stood paralyzed in the marble-floored lobby, staring at 3 garbage bags bulging with my possessions. My potted succulent peeked pathetically from the top of one bag, soil spilling onto my framed achievement certificates. My wireless mouse dangled by its cord from another, like it was trying to escape. "You're 25, Avira said, tapping her silver watch with a manicured nail. "We're downsizing. Get out now. I had just stepped through the revolving doors, my carry-on still trailing behind me. The overnight flight from Phoenix had left my eyes raw and my mind foggy. 12 hours ago, I'd been shaking hands with the CEO of the largest shipping company in the Southwest, securing a contract worth millions after 3 days of nonstop negotiations. Behind Avira stood a cluster of my colleagues, Tristan from accounting, Naomi and Spencer from marketing, Reed from legal. Their expressions ranged from shocked to awkwardly amused. Reed actually smirked, his eyes darting between me and Avira like he was watching a particularly juicy reality show confrontation. I don't understand, I managed, my voice embarrassingly small in the cavernous lobby. The security guard at the front desk pretended to study his computer screen, but his eyes kept flicking up to watch the scene unfold. It's simple, Brielle, Avira continued, louder than necessary. The company is restructuring. Your position has been eliminated. Everything you need is in these bags. The front doors opened and 2 women in sleek business attire walked in, pausing when they noticed our group. Their presence drew even more attention to my humiliation. I felt sweat gathering at my hairline, but the Henderson account, I just finalized. We'll handle all client transitions. Avira cut me off, checking her phone. The separation paperwork will arrive by email. Your building access has already been terminated. I reached for my key card out of habit, but it was upstairs on my desk, alongside the notes I'd compiled for Monday's presentation. My laptop has all my files, I said, suddenly panicking about 3 years of work. My contacts, my Dishin. Company property. Avira smiled thinly. It has already wiped your personal files to a flash drive. She nodded toward the smallest garbage bag. Everything else belongs to us. Naomi at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Spencer studied the floor tiles like they contained the secrets of the universe. You can't be serious, I whispered, the reality beginning to sink in. I've been here 3 years. I deserve. You deserve exactly what you're getting, Avira interrupted again, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Perhaps you should have remembered who runs this department before getting so familiar with our clients. The accusation hit like ice water. I'd done nothing wrong except do my job exceptionally well. You have 15 minutes before I call security, Avira said, checking her watch again. I suggest you don't make this more embarrassing than it already is. The crowd watching grew as people streamed in for the workday. Some slowed their pace, rubbernecking like passing a highway accident. Others hurried past, pretending not to notice. I stood there, jet-lagged and disoriented, as my professional life sat stuffed into garbage bags at my feet. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, 3 years of canceled plans with friends, 3 years of being the first to arrive and last to leave. I bent down to gather the bags, struggling with their awkward weight. Nobody moved to help. When I finally straightened, balancing all 3 bags while trying to maintain some dignity, I caught Avira's expression, a fleeting glimpse of something that looked like satisfaction. That's when I knew. This wasn't about downsizing. This was personal. I shouldered my way through the lobby, past the staring faces and whispered comments. The weight of the bags strained my flight-stiffened muscles. Halfway to the exit, my planner fell out, pages fluttering open to reveal color-coded client notes and meeting schedules stretching months into the future. I left it there on the floor, a bright splash of organization amid chaos. Outside in the parking garage, I somehow managed to stuff the bags into my trunk. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Through the windshield, I could see them all still standing in the lobby, watching me through the glass doors. I started the engine, and then, instead of crying or screaming or peeling out of the garage in a fury of burning rubber and exhaust, I did something that would change everything. I smiled. It wasn't forced or fake. It was calm. Knowing. I waved at the cluster of people in the lobby, put my car in reverse, and drove away. None of them realized what they'd just done, but they would. Oh, they would. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button to let me know. Subscribe to catch the next part, and leave a comment below about what you think Brielle might do next. Now, let's continue with our story. My name is Brielle Kerwin, and until 3 hours ago, I was the senior client relations specialist at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. I wasn't always the quiet, competent professional they'd just tossed aside like yesterday's lunch. Growing up in a tiny apartment above my mother's struggling tailor shop had taught me to fight for every opportunity. My mother, with her calloused fingers and determined smile, had drilled into me that education was my escape route. Be so good they can't ignore you, she'd say while pinning hems until midnight. I'd won a partial scholarship to university and worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. 4 years of sleeping 5 hours a night while maintaining a 3.9 GPA had earned me my degree and the attention of several recruiters. When the offer came from Avira's firm, it had seemed like a dream. Healthcare benefits, retirement plan, a salary that meant my mother could finally retire. I drove aimlessly after leaving the office, my mind struggling to process what had happened. The Henderson deal had been worth millions. I'd spent months cultivating that relationship, learning about their operations, understanding their pain points. I knew the names of the CEO's children, remembered his assistant's birthday, and had custom designed a solution that addressed every concern their board had raised. Avira had barely participated in any of the meetings, but her name appeared first on all the proposals. That was our unspoken arrangement. I did the work, she took the credit, and the company prospered. Until today. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot and finally let myself break down. The tears came in silent, angry waves. I wasn't crying because I'd lost my job. I was crying because I'd been betrayed. My phone buzzed with messages from concerned colleagues, not the ones who'd stood behind Avira, but the ones who worked in other departments. News traveled fast. What happened? Are you okay? This doesn't make sense. I ignored them all and dialed my mother instead. They fired me, I said when she answered. Her silence spoke volumes. Then, come home. I'll make tea. My mother's tea couldn't fix this, but her tiny house in the suburbs was exactly where I needed to be. Away from the gleaming office tower with its marble lobby and glass doors. Away from Avira and her watchful eyes. Away from the humiliation. I spent that first day in a fog, recounting the story to my mother, who listened with narrowed eyes and pursed lips. Something doesn't add up, she finally said. Why now, after you just secured that big client? The question haunted me as I lay awake that night. Why now? The timing made no sense, unless someone didn't want me there for the aftermath of the Henderson deal. The next morning, I forced myself to review the termination paperwork that had arrived by email. The legal language was cold and impersonal. Reduction in workforce. At-will employment. 2 weeks severance. Nothing about my achievements or contributions. Nothing about the reason behind the sudden decision. At the bottom of the email was a non-disclosure agreement and a non-compete clause that would prevent me from working with any of the firm's clients for 12 months. I almost signed it automatically, the obedient employee to the end, but something stopped me. A memory surfaced from 2 weeks earlier. I had stayed late to prepare presentation materials for the Henderson meeting. The office was nearly empty when I heard voices from Avira's glass-walled office. The door was partially open, and Avira was speaking to Tristan, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet space. Brielle is becoming a problem, she'd said. The clients are asking for her directly now. Henderson specifically requested her for the Phoenix meetings. So, what are you going to do? Tristan had asked. I've already done it, Avira replied. Minka starts next month. Her father and I go way back. She'll take over Brielle's accounts. What about Brielle? She's young. She'll bounce back. Besides, technically we're downsizing her department. They'd laughed then, the sound slicing through me like a knife. I'd gathered my things and slipped out, convincing myself I'd misunderstood. Surely my stellar performance would protect me. Now, staring at the non-compete agreement, that conversation took on new meaning. I wasn't fired because of downsizing. I was fired because I'd become too valuable, because the clients preferred me to Avira. I closed the email without signing anything. That's when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with our city's area code. Is this Brielle Kerwin? A man's voice asked when I answered. Yes. Who's this? Calvin Henderson. We met in Phoenix? I've been trying to reach you through your office, but they're giving me the runaround. Something about you being no longer with the company? My heart raced. Calvin Henderson, CEO of Henderson Shipping, was calling me personally. That's correct, I said carefully. As of yesterday. Well, that's downright strange timing, he replied. Especially since I specifically told your boss I wanted you as our point person moving forward. The pieces clicked into place. Mr. Henderson, Calvin, please. Calvin, what exactly did Avira tell you about my departure? His answer chilled me to the bone. She said you'd accepted another position, that you'd left them high and dry right after the contract signing. He paused, but that didn't sound like the woman who spent 3 days helping us navigate our restructuring, so I decided to call you directly. Avira had lied to a multi-million-dollar client about me. I was terminated yesterday, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, when I returned from Phoenix. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably before Calvin spoke again. I see. Well, this certainly changes things. Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. As I hung up, a notification appeared, an email from another client, asking if the rumors of my departure were true. Then another message, from a junior colleague I'd mentored, expressing confusion and concern. I set my phone aside and opened my laptop. Instead of job hunting, I found myself creating a new document. At the top, I typed, Client Contact List. From memory, I began recording every client relationship I'd built over 3 years. Names, preferences, pain points, project histories, information that lived in my head, not in the company database. Details no non-compete could take from me. By evening, I had 4 pages of notes and a decision. I wouldn't sign the non-compete. I wouldn't fade quietly away. Avira thought she'd eliminated a threat. Instead, she'd created one. As the sun set, my phone lit up with a notification. A text message from an unknown number. Brielle, this is Naomi from the office. Something weird is happening with the Henderson account. Avira can't find your notes, and the client is asking questions she can't answer. Where did you keep the Henderson files? I stared at the message, a slow warmth spreading through me. It had been exactly 24 hours since my unceremonious dismissal, and already, things were starting to unravel. I didn't reply to Naomi's message. Instead, I watched as my phone lit up with 3 more notifications in quick succession. Brielle, it's important. Please call me. Avira is freaking out. The Henderson implementation meeting is tomorrow. The implementation meeting. Of course. The part where all the promises made during negotiations had to be translated into actionable plans. The part I usually handled. I set my phone face down on the table and made myself a cup of tea. My mother watched me from the doorway of her small kitchen. You're smiling, she observed. That's new. Just thinking about something, I replied, stirring honey into my cup. About how quickly they realize they need you? I looked up at her shrewd expression. My mother had survived an abusive marriage, immigrated to a new country alone with a child, and built a business from nothing. She understood more about power dynamics than most corporate executives. Something like that, I admitted. She nodded and returned to her sewing room, where she now made costumes for local theater productions, not because she needed the money anymore, but because she loved creating beautiful things. The next morning, I met Calvin Henderson at an upscale restaurant downtown. He greeted me with a firm handshake and concerned eyes. I checked into the situation, he said after we ordered. Spoke with some board members I know. This wasn't a downsizing. I'm aware, I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the anger still simmering beneath my calm exterior. What happened yesterday at the implementation meeting was, he paused, searching for the right word, illuminating. Your replacement seemed unfamiliar with the most basic elements of our agreement. Minka, I supplied. She's new, very new. Calvin agreed. And your former boss struggled to answer questions about the custom logistics module you designed for us, the one that was the deciding factor in our signing with your firm. I sipped my water, waiting. I'll be direct, Brielle. We signed with your firm because of you. The board was impressed with your understanding of our operations and your creative solutions. Now we're concerned about implementation. He slid a business card across the table. I'd like to hire you as an independent consultant to oversee the transition. Whatever your former firm was paying you, I'll double it. My heart raced. This was an unexpected turn, a golden opportunity handed to me less than 48 hours after being unceremoniously fired. But something felt off. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I'm concerned about potential conflicts. I haven't signed the non-compete agreement yet, but we've already consulted our legal team, Calvin interrupted. Since you were terminated without cause, and since we approached you rather than the other way around, any non-compete would be difficult to enforce. Besides, he smiled, we're not asking you to take our business elsewhere. We're asking you to ensure we get what we paid for from your former employer. It was elegant. I would still be working on the Henderson account, but now as their representative rather than Avira's. I would be in meetings with my former colleagues, with Avira, monitoring their performance. I'll need to think about it, I said, though my mind was already racing with possibilities. Of course, but don't think too long. We have another implementation meeting scheduled for Friday. As we finished lunch, my phone buzzed with another message from Avira. Where are the Henderson implementation templates? This is urgent. I tucked my phone away without responding and thanked Calvin for lunch. On the drive home, I called Ezra, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in employment law. They can't enforce a non-compete if you haven't signed it, he confirmed after hearing my situation. And terminating you immediately after you landed a major client would make any judge suspicious. Want me to review any paperwork they send? Please, I agreed. And one more thing. If I were to start my own consulting business, what should I know? His advice was thorough and practical. By the time I arrived home, I had a to-do list that included registering a business name, setting up a business bank account, and creating a basic website. 3 days after being fired, I had accomplished all three. I named my consultancy Carowin Solutions and created a simple professional website highlighting my experience in client relations and implementation management. I made no mention of specific clients or projects from my previous employment. That same day, I accepted Calvin Henderson's offer. The first implementation meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday at my former office building. I dressed carefully that morning, a charcoal gray suit I'd never worn to the office before, subtle makeup, my hair styled differently than my usual work look, small changes that added up to a new image. Brielle the independent consultant, not Brielle the subordinate. The security guard did a double take when I approached the front desk. Miss Kerwin, I thought, I'm here for the Henderson implementation meeting, I explained, presenting Calvin's business card. I'm consulting for them now. His eyebrows shot up as he made a quick call, then handed me a visitor badge. 15th floor conference room. The elevator ride gave me time to steady my nerves. When the doors opened on 15, I nearly collided with Reed from legal. Brielle? He sputtered, coffee sloshing in his cup. What are you doing here? Working, I replied simply, walking past him toward the conference room. I arrived 5 minutes early, but Calvin and 2 members of his team were already there, along with Naomi and Spencer from marketing. Their expressions when they saw me ranged from shock, Spencer, to cautious relief, Naomi. Brielle will be overseeing the implementation from our side, Calvin announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Naomi's eyes widened. Spencer studied his tablet intently. At precisely 10 a.m., Avira strode into the room, followed by Tristan and a young woman I assumed was Minka. Avira stopped dead when she saw me, her professional smile freezing in place. What is the meaning of this? She asked, her voice low but sharp. Ms. Kerwin is representing Henderson Shipping's interests during implementation. Calvin explained smoothly. Given her intimate knowledge of the project, we felt it was a prudent addition to ensure quality control. Avira's face cycled through several expressions before settling on a tight smile. How resourceful of you, Calvin. The meeting proceeded with excruciating awkwardness. Minka clearly had no understanding of the complex logistics module I'd designed. Avira kept interrupting to clarify points that only confused matters further. Tristan repeatedly checked his phone, as if hoping for rescue. Through it all, I remained professionally detached, asking pointed questions when necessary and taking careful notes. I didn't need to be vindictive or petty. The situation was doing all the work for me. After 2 painful hours, Calvin called for a break. As people filed out for coffee, Avira cornered me by the window. "Clever move," she hissed. "But if you think this little stunt will work—" "This isn't a stunt," I interrupted calmly. "This is business. Henderson hired me to protect their investment. I'm simply doing my job. You're trying to sabotage me." "No, Avira. You did that yourself. When you fired the only person who fully understood this project." Her eyes narrowed. "I've built this department from nothing. Do you really think one client can take me down?" "I don't want to take you down," I replied truthfully. "I just want to ensure Henderson gets what they paid for." It wasn't entirely a lie. I didn't want to destroy Avira or the company. I just wanted justice, and perhaps a little recognition of my worth. As the meeting reconvened, I noticed Naomi watching me with newfound respect. Even Spencer seemed impressed by my composure. By the end of the day, we had a revised implementation schedule that would require twice-weekly meetings, all of which I would attend as Henderson's representative. "Well handled," Calvin said as we left the building together. "Though I admit, the entertainment value alone was worth your fee." I smiled politely but didn't engage with the joke. This wasn't about humiliating Avira, satisfying as that might be. This was about establishing myself as a professional in my own right. Over the next 2 weeks, my phone continued to buzz with messages from my former workplace. Not just from Naomi now, but from other colleagues seeking information about clients, systems, and processes that only I fully understood. I answered some, ignored others, always professional but never giving away more than necessary. Meanwhile, word spread about my new consulting business. A former client called to congratulate me on my promotion and casually mentioned they were unhappy with their current service. Another asked if I could review a proposal they'd received, just as a favor. I redirected these conversations carefully, never soliciting business directly, but making it clear I was available for consultation. It was a delicate balance. I didn't want to appear vindictive or predatory, but I also knew my value now in a way I hadn't before. 3 weeks after my firing, I received an unexpected visitor at my mother's house. Spencer from marketing stood awkwardly on the porch, clutching a manila envelope. "Sorry to just show up," he said when I opened the door. But I didn't want this going through official channels. Inside the envelope was an internal memo about the Henderson account, marked confidential. It detailed mounting concerns about implementation delays and client dissatisfaction. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Spencer shifted uncomfortably. "Because it's a mess, Brielle. Minka quit yesterday. Just walked out in tears after Avira berated her in front of everyone. The client is threatening to cancel, and—" He hesitated. "Avira's blaming you." "Me? I'm doing exactly what Henderson hired me to do. She's saying you're deliberately withholding information, that you're sabotaging the implementation to make her look bad." I handed the envelope back to him. "I'm not withholding anything, Spencer. I'm helping Henderson navigate a system I designed. If Avira can't fulfill the contract without me, that's not my problem." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think what happened to you was wrong. A lot of us do." After he left, I sat on the porch swing, processing this new information. Avira was growing desperate. Good. But her accusations stung. I had been professional at every meeting, helpful when directly asked. I wasn't sabotaging anything, was I? The thought nagged at me as I prepared for the next implementation meeting. Was I unconsciously making things more difficult? Was I enjoying their struggles too much? I arrived at the office building the next morning with these questions still churning in my mind. But what I found in the conference room pushed all doubts aside. Avira sat at the head of the table, a triumphant gleam in her eye. Beside her was a stranger in an expensive suit. Calvin and his team were already seated, looking uncomfortable. "Ah, Brielle," Avira said with false warmth. "So glad you could join us. This is Dominic from our legal department. He has some concerns about your involvement with this client." Dominic slid a document across the table. "We believe you're in violation of your non-compete agreement, Ms. Kerwin." "I never signed a non-compete," I replied evenly. "It was included in your original employment contract," Dominic countered. Page 17, paragraph 3. He was right. I remembered now. A clause buried in the fine print of my hiring paperwork 3 years ago. a standard boilerplate I'd barely noticed at the time. Calvin frowned. This seems unnecessarily adversarial. Ms. Kerwin is providing an essential service to ensure the successful implementation of the system she designed. Nevertheless, Dominic continued, we must insist that she cease all involvement with Henderson Shipping immediately, or will be forced to pursue legal action. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. I could feel the trap closing around me. If I fought this, I'd be entangled in expensive legal proceedings. If I backed down, I'd lose my only client and my newfound confidence along with it. I glanced at Calvin, who gave me a slight nod of reassurance. Then I looked directly at Avira, whose smile hadn't quite reached her eyes. I understand your position, I said carefully, and I'd be happy to comply with any valid legal obligations. Avira's smile widened. However, I continued, before we proceed, I think we should address the other legal matter at hand. What other matter? Dominic asked, frowning. I opened my laptop and turned it to face the room. On the screen was an email, one I'd recovered from my personal archives the night before. This is an email from Avira to me, dated last year, explicitly authorizing me to develop custom solutions for clients under my own supervision. It effectively creates an exception to the standard non-compete for work I personally developed. Avira's face drained of color. That's taken out of context. The context is quite clear. I continued, scrolling to show a series of similar communications. As is the pattern of authorization for independent work, my lawyer believes this constitutes a modification of my employment terms. It was a bluff. I hadn't actually consulted a lawyer about these specific emails, but the documents were real, saved because I'd been proud of the autonomy Avira had granted me, autonomy that, ironically, had led to my current situation. Dominic reached for the laptop, scanning the emails with growing concern. I'll need to review these more thoroughly. Of course, I agreed. In the meantime, perhaps we should focus on ensuring Henderson's implementation proceeds smoothly? Unless you'd prefer to explain to them why their project is being delayed by internal disputes? Calvin cleared his throat. Speaking as the client, we would indeed prefer to continue with Ms. Kerwin's involvement. Any other outcome would force us to reconsider our relationship with your firm entirely. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Avira's carefully constructed trap had backfired spectacularly. After a tense silence, Dominic gathered his papers. We'll continue this discussion at a later date. For now, the meeting can proceed as planned. As he and Avira whispered heatedly in the corner, I caught Calvin watching me with newfound respect. I'd stood my ground. I'd outsmarted them at their own game. But this wasn't victory. Not yet. It was merely the first real battle in what was becoming a war of attrition. And I was just getting started. The stalemate with Avira continued for the next 2 weeks. I attended every Henderson implementation meeting, providing guidance while carefully maintaining my professional distance. Dominic from legal watched me like a hawk, but never followed through on his threats of legal action. The emails I'd produced had created enough uncertainty to keep them at bay. See, for now. Behind the scenes, however, things were shifting rapidly. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues seeking advice or clarification on projects I'd managed. I answered when I could, always polite but increasingly brief. My priority was establishing my own business, not solving their problems for free. Calvin Henderson proved to be more than just a client. He became an advocate. He mentioned my services to other business owners in his network, describing me as the problem solver who saved our implementation. 3 weeks after starting my consultancy, I signed my second client. A week later, a third. Meanwhile, the situation at my former workplace deteriorated. Spencer, who had become an unexpected ally, kept me informed through occasional texts. Second implementation meeting disaster. Client threatening to pull out. Avira presented your logistics model as her own. Couldn't answer basic questions about how it works. 3 people quit marketing department yesterday. I took no pleasure in their struggles. Well, perhaps a small amount where Avira was concerned, but I remained focused on building something new rather than watching something old crumble. 6 weeks after my firing, I signed the lease on a small office space downtown. It wasn't much, Terry. Just 2 rooms with large windows and enough space for a desk, meeting table, and small kitchenette. but it was mine. No glass walls for others to peer through. No politics. No Avira. My mother helped me move in, arranging my sparse furniture with the same care she once arranged fabric in her tailor shop. "You need plants," she declared, surveying the empty corners. "Life needs growing things." The next day, she arrived with 3 potted plants, hardy, low-maintenance varieties that could survive my irregular attention. One was a cutting from the succulent that had been unceremoniously dumped into a garbage bag on the day of my firing. I'd managed to salvage it, and now its offspring would witness my new beginning. That afternoon, as I was setting up my new computer system, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Brielle Kerwin?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking. This is Lyra Westerly. I'm the board chair at your former employer." My hand tightened around the phone. The board chair? In 6 weeks of escalating drama, the board had never been mentioned. "What can I do for you, Miss Westerly?" "I think we should meet in person," she replied. "There are some matters we need to discuss regarding your departure from the company and your current relationship with Henderson Shipping." My stomach clenched. Had Avira finally convinced the board to take legal action against me? "I'm available tomorrow afternoon," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing thoughts. "Perfect. My assistant will send the details." After we hung up, I immediately called Ezra for legal advice. He agreed to accompany me to the meeting and spent an hour reviewing my situation, the absence of a signed non-compete after my termination, the emails authorizing my independent work, the circumstances of my firing. "Legally, you're on solid ground," he concluded. "But board chairs don't typically get involved in departmental staffing disputes. Something bigger is happening." The meeting was set for 2 p.m. the next day at a private dining room in an upscale hotel downtown. When Ezra and I arrived, we found not just Lyra Westerly, but 3 other board members waiting for us. No sign of Avira. Lyra, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with a silver bob and understated jewelry, stood to greet us. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Kerwin, and you've brought counsel. Very prudent." She gestured to the others. "This is informal, but we thought it important to meet face to face." We settled around the table, and Lyra wasted no time getting to the point. "We've been conducting an internal review of recent events in the client relations department," she began. "What we've found is concerning." One of the board members, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, slid a folder across the table. "This contains documentation of systematic credit misappropriation, client relationship interference, and potentially discriminatory termination practices," he explained, "all centering around your former supervisor, Avira Donovan." I opened the folder to find emails, meeting minutes, and performance reviews. A paper trail showing how Avira had consistently taken credit for my work, deliberately kept me from certain high-profile meetings, and planned my termination weeks before the Henderson deal was finalized. "We became aware of these issues only after multiple client complaints following your departure," Lyra continued. "Henderson Shipping was simply the most vocal. Others have expressed similar concerns about continuity and account management." I glanced at Ezra, who gave me a subtle nod to continue listening. "Why are you sharing this with me?" I asked carefully. Lyra exchanged looks with her colleagues before answering. "We have 2 proposals for your consideration. First, we'd like to offer you your position back, with a substantial promotion, salary increase, and direct reporting line to the executive team, CS, bypassing Ms. Donovan entirely." The offer hung in the air like an unexpected gift. 6 weeks ago, I would have jumped at the chance. Now, I waited for the other shoe to drop. "And the second proposal?" Lyra smiled slightly. "Alternatively, we'd like to discuss acquiring your consultancy." That, I had not expected. "You want to buy my 6-week-old business?" "We want to acquire your expertise and client relationships before our competitors do," corrected the woman sitting beside Lyra. "Your departure has revealed significant vulnerabilities in our client management structure. Several major accounts are now at risk." Ezra leaned forward. "Before we discuss either option, we need clarity on Ms. Kerwin's legal standing. There have been threats of litigation regarding non-compete violations." "Those threats were not authorized by the board," Lyra said firmly, "and they will not be pursued, regardless of your decision today." For the next hour, we discussed details of both proposals. The return offer included a director-level position with a salary double my previous one. The acquisition offer included a generous upfront payment plus a 3-year consulting contract. "We'll need time to consider," Ezra said as the meeting concluded. "Of course," Lyra agreed. "But we would appreciate an answer within the week. The situation remains fluid." Outside the hotel, Ezra and I dissected the meeting. "They're desperate," he observed. "Henderson was just the tip of the iceberg. They're losing clients left and right without you." "But why acquisition? Why not just hire me back?" "Because they know you might leave again. This way, they lock in your expertise and eliminate a potential competitor in one move." I spent the next 3 days weighing my options. The money was tempting. Either offer would set me up financially for years, but returning meant working in the same environment that had discarded me so callously. Acquisition meant giving up my newfound independence before I'd truly experienced it. There was also the matter of Avira. Neither option had clarified her status, though reading between the lines, it seemed the board was building a case for her removal. On the 3rd day, as I sat in my new office, staring at the contract drafts Ezra had prepared, my phone rang. Calvin Henderson again. "Brielle, have you heard the news?" "What news?" "Your former employer just lost the Beaumont account. It's all over the industry forums." Beaumont was their 2nd largest client after Henderson, a relationship that predated even Avira's time at the company. "What happened?" I asked, genuinely shocked. "Apparently, there was a major service failure last week. No one could access the specialized reporting portal your team had built for them. When they called for support, they got a runaround." He paused. "Word is, they're looking for new consultants. I may have mentioned your name." After we hung up, I sat in silence, processing this development. The Beaumont account represented millions in annual revenue. Its loss would be devastating, possibly fatal for Avira's department. My phone buzzed with a text from Spencer. "Total meltdown here. Avira called emergency all hands. Beaumont gone. Blaming everyone but herself." Another piece clicked into place. The board's urgency suddenly made perfect sense. That evening, I made my decision. I called Lyra Westerly directly. "I've considered both offers," I told her, "and I have a counterproposal." 2 days later, I walked into my former office building, not as a visitor or consultant, but as the newly appointed head of client success, a division created specifically for me that would operate parallel to Avira's department, but with oversight of all major account implementations. The announcement had been made company-wide an hour earlier. Employees stared as I crossed the lobby, whispers following in my wake. The security guard grinned and handed me a new access card, not a visitor badge. "Welcome back, Ms. Kerwin." I took the elevator to the executive floor, 2 levels above my previous department. My new office awaited, with windows overlooking the city and a nameplate already on the door. Inside, I found Lyra Westerly waiting. "Everything to your satisfaction?" she asked. "It's a good start," I replied, setting down my bag. "The transition team is ready whenever you are. They're eager to hear your plans for the Beaumont recovery strategy. I'll meet them this afternoon. First, I need to address my former department." Lyra raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Of course. They're gathered in conference room A for Avira's emergency meeting. Perfect timing." 10 minutes later, I stood outside conference room A, listening to Avira's voice through the door as she outlined desperate measures to prevent further client defections. "Must all pull together to weather this storm. I've prepared individual client retention assignments." I pushed open the door. The room fell silent. 20 faces turned toward me, some confused, others hopeful, a few wary. Avira stood frozen at the head of the table, presentation clicker in hand, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide her exhaustion. "Brielle," she managed, recovering quickly. "I heard about your new position. Congratulations. We were just discussing emergency measures for Fayan. I know what you were discussing." I interrupted calmly, moving to stand at the opposite end of the table. "And I'm here to inform you that all major client retention efforts will now route through the Client Success Division." Avira's smile tightened. "Perhaps we should discuss the transition privately. After this meeting?" "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. "The board has approved my reorganization plan effective immediately. Your team will continue handling new business development, but implementation and retention for all existing clients now falls under my purview. The room erupted in whispers. Avira's face flushed with anger and humiliation, the same emotions I'd felt standing in the lobby with my belongings in garbage bags. "This is completely inappropriate," she hissed. "You can't just waltz in and—" "Actually, I can. It's all outlined in the memo that went out this morning. I'm surprised you haven't read it yet." I turned to address the room. Everyone who worked directly on implementation and client management should report to the executive conference room in 30 minutes for reassignment. That meant nearly everyone present. Avira's department would be gutted, left with just her and a few sales associates. As people gathered their things, expressions ranging from shocked to secretly pleased, I approached Avira directly. "Don't worry," I said quietly, so only she could hear. "You're not being fired. The board felt that would be too disruptive. You'll keep your title and office. You just won't have much to do besides basic sales. No client contact, no implementation oversight, no team to manage." The color drained from her face as she realized the full implications. "This is your revenge, isn't it? You orchestrated this whole thing." I smiled, the same calm, knowing smile I'd given her from my car that day in the parking garage. "I didn't orchestrate anything, Avira. I simply became so good they couldn't ignore me." I gestured to the nearly empty room. "Everything else is just the natural consequence of your decisions." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and don't bother looking for another position in this industry. I haven't said a negative word about you to anyone. I haven't had to. Your reputation has spread all on its own." In the hallway, I took a deep breath. This wasn't about cruelty or vindictiveness. This was justice. Avira would keep her job and salary, just as I'd been left with mine. But she would know, every day, that her power was gone. Her influence evaporated. Her future stagnant. She would sit in her glass office, watching as I rebuilt what she had tried to destroy. She would witness clients who once barely acknowledged her now seeking me out specifically. She would see her former team thriving under my leadership. And she would understand, finally, that the quiet, competent woman she had discarded so carelessly had been the foundation holding everything together. My revenge wasn't taking her job or ruining her career. My revenge was succeeding where she had expected me to fail. My revenge was becoming undeniable. Within 6 months, our client retention rate rose from 68% to 97%. Implementation complaints dropped to near zero. The Beaumont account returned, along with 3 others that had been considering departure. Our team expanded, adding specialties and capabilities that attracted new business across sectors. Avira remained in her glass office, handling basic sales calls and preparing reports that few people read. She never quit. That would have been admitting defeat. Instead, she adapted to her diminished role, occasionally attempting to insert herself into client relationships but finding no traction. A year to the day after I found my belongings in garbage bags, the board promoted me to Chief Client Officer, a new C-suite position, created to recognize the transformation I'd led. The announcement was made at the annual company meeting, with Avira sitting in the back row, politely applauding with everyone else. As I took the stage to accept, I caught her eye briefly. There was no anger there anymore, just a resigned acknowledgement of what we both knew. Her greatest mistake hadn't been firing me. It had been underestimating me. That evening, as I prepared to leave my office, I found a small package on my desk, a potted succulent with a simple note, from one survivor to another. "Mom." I placed it on my windowsill beside the offspring of my original office plant, the one that had been dumped in a garbage bag, yet somehow survived and thrived, just like me. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and professional revenge, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping stories of triumph over adversity. What would you have done in Brielle's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about building yourself into something they can't ignore. The heat hit me first, a wall of scorching air that stole my breath as I yanked open the heavy metal door. The storage room was dark except for the emergency light casting an eerie red glow across metal shelves stacked with supplies. That's when I saw her, Penelope, crumpled against the far wall, her uniform soaked through with sweat, hair plastered to her forehead. "Penny?" I whispered, rushing toward her. Her eyes fluttered open, cracked lips parting. "Vera?" Her voice was a dry rasp. "Water, please." The digital thermometer on the wall read 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In July, with no ventilation, the storage room had become an oven. I touched her arm. Her skin burned against my fingertips. "How long have you been in here?" I asked, already pulling my water bottle from my bag. She gulped greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Since yesterday afternoon, after the meeting." My stomach clenched. 17 hours trapped in sweltering heat. "I found something," she whispered, eyes darting to the door. "In the safety reports." When I showed Kent Alvarez, regional manager, the man who'd given me a final warning last week for questioning overtime policies. He told me to double-check some inventory. She continued, said he'd be right back. Then, click. Her fingers weakly mimicked a key turning. I screamed until my voice gave out. I helped her stand, her legs buckling beneath her. The guard wouldn't arrive for another hour. Management had implemented a strict policy. No unauthorized personnel in office areas outside working hours. Penny had been invisible, trapped, while the cleaning crew vacuumed just yards away. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said, supporting her weight. She clutched my arm, nails digging in. "The reports. They're falsifying safety checks, Vera. Equipment that failed inspection. They're still using it. Someone's going to get hurt." As we stumbled toward the exit, Penny suddenly froze. Through the glass panel in the door, I could see Kent walking across the parking lot, 40 minutes earlier than his usual arrival. His face, when he spotted us through the window, first shock, then something darker flickering across his features, told me everything. He knew exactly what he'd done, and he'd done it on purpose. I wonder if you've ever seen someone's mask slip. That moment when the person you thought you knew reveals something monstrous underneath? If you have, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear how this nightmare at work ended, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My name is Vera Tennyson, 32 years old, 5 years at Woodland Manufacturing, and until that morning, I believed hard work and honesty were enough to succeed. I was raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Grandma Rose taught kindergarten for 40 years and raised me with simple values: tell the truth, help others, and stand up for what's right. I started in packaging and worked my way up to quality control supervisor. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills for my small apartment and kept me close to my grandmother as her health declined. Woodland made industrial water pumps, critical equipment for cities across the Midwest. Our products had to be flawless. Penny and I weren't close friends, just workplace allies. She'd transferred from the Eastern Branch 6 months earlier, brilliant, detail-oriented, and refreshingly straightforward. While other coworkers avoided management scrutiny by keeping their heads down, Penny asked questions. She studied manuals, memorized safety protocols, and suggested improvements. Management hated her for it. "They're waiting for me to quit," she'd told me during lunch break 3 weeks before the incident. "But my son starts college next year. I need this job." I remember thinking she was paranoid, until that morning when I found her locked in what could have become her tomb. Kent's face hardened as he strode through the door. All business now, the momentary shock replaced with controlled anger. "What are you doing here so early, Vera? And why is Penelope out of the storage area?" The casualness of his question made my skin crawl. "She was locked in overnight," I said, still supporting Penny's weight. "The temperature's over 100 degrees in there. She needs medical attention." Kent straightened his tie. "There must be some misunderstanding. Penelope was assigned inventory duty. The door doesn't lock from the outside." Penny's fingers dug into my arm. "You locked me in," she whispered. "You knew what you were doing." "That's a serious accusation," Kent said, his voice dangerously soft. "One that could have consequences. For both of you." 2 other employees arrived then, stopping short at the scene before them. Kent's demeanor shifted instantly. "Penelope isn't feeling well," he announced loudly. "Vera, please take her to urgent care." company policy requires an incident report. I'll have it ready when you return. I helped Penny to my car, the weight of Kent's stare burning into my back. The urgent care doctor didn't bother hiding his concern. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion that could have progressed to heat stroke. Another few hours. He shook his head. How exactly did this happen? While Penny received IV fluids, I called her son, Drake, a high school senior with his mother's serious eyes. When he arrived, his face crumpled at the sight of his mother in a hospital bed. Mom works so hard, he told me in the hallway. Since Dad left, it's been just us. She takes every overtime shift they offer. When Penny was stable enough to talk, she told us everything. The irregularities she'd found in the safety inspection reports. Equipment that had failed critical tests but received passing marks. Maintenance schedules altered. Her meeting with Kent where he'd suggested she was confused about the regulations. He knew exactly what he was doing, she said, voice stronger now. Putting me in that room was a message. We need to report this, I insisted. Penny's laugh was bitter. To who? Regional Director Preston is Kent's brother-in-law. HR reports directly to them. The last person who filed a complaint was transferred to night shift until they quit. Drake took his mother's hand. Mom, you can't go back there. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the decision form. I won't. We returned to Woodland that afternoon with resignation letters. Kent accepted them with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Unfortunate you both feel this way, he said smoothly. But perhaps it's for the best. Small towns have small memories, but word does travel about. Difficult employees. As we walked to our cars for the last time, Penny turned to me. Thank you. If you hadn't come in early today, don't. I cut her off, unable to contemplate the alternative. What will you do now? She asked. I hadn't thought that far ahead. My grandmother needed her medications. I had rent due in 2 weeks. I'll find something, I said with more confidence than I felt. Kent's parting threat proved prophetic. Within days, the rejections began. Positions I was qualified for suddenly filled before interviews. Applications mysteriously lost. One potential employer actually winced when he saw my resume. You worked at Woodland? He asked, already closing my file. Penny faced similar obstacles. After 3 weeks of rejections, she and Drake moved in with her sister 2 states away. It's not right, she told me during our goodbye call. They're going to hurt someone, Vera. Those pumps go into hospitals, nursing homes, schools. I'd been living on ramen and picking up delivery gigs to make rent. Grandma Rose had raised me to believe in justice, but justice seemed in short supply. What can we do? I asked. No one will listen. Someone will, Penny replied. We just need to make them hear us. After we hung up, I sat in my darkening apartment, fury building inside me. Kent and the others had calculated exactly how much power they held in our small town. They'd weaponized our need for jobs, our community connections, our limited options, and they'd nearly killed Penny to silence her. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to play with people's lives, they'd learn that some people fight back. I opened my laptop and began to research. The annual Midwest Industrial Safety Conference was 6 weeks away. Woodland Manufacturing would host the event, showcasing their commitment to safety with state inspectors, industry leaders, and regulators in attendance. Kent was scheduled as the keynote speaker. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had as much reason to hate Kent as I did. Penny, I have an idea, but I'll need your help, and we'll need others. For the first time since finding her in that storage room, I felt something beyond anger and helplessness. I felt purpose. What I didn't know then was how many others had suffered under Woodland's management, or how far Kent would go to protect himself, or that our plan would spiral into something far bigger and more dangerous than we'd imagined. I also didn't know that someone inside Woodland was watching our every move, ready to destroy us before we could expose the truth. The first hint that we weren't alone in our fight came 3 days later. I was delivering pizzas, my 3rd shift that week, when the customer opened her door and gasped, "You're Vera Tennyson," she said, eyes wide. I nodded warily, used to small-town recognition, but suspicious now. I'm Zola. I worked at Woodland for 8 years. Accounting department. She glanced over her shoulder before pulling me inside. You need to know something. You and Penelope weren't the first. In her kitchen, Zola showed me a notebook filled with dates, names, and incidents. I started keeping track 3 years ago, after the acquisition. I scanned the pages, ice spreading through my veins. 13 employees who'd raised safety concerns, all systematically isolated, harassed, or placed in dangerous situations until they quit. One had suffered chemical burns in a storage accident remarkably similar to Penny's. Why didn't anyone report this? I asked. Zola's smile was sad. To who? The local paper's owner plays golf with Preston. The county inspector's daughter got a management position at Woodland right out of college. They've built their fortress carefully. Why are you showing me this? Because you're still fighting, she said simply. And you're not the only one. We've been waiting for the right moment. My phone chimed with another delivery reminder. As I stood to leave, Zola pressed a flash drive into my hand. Financial records, she whispered. Where the money's really going instead of equipment maintenance. Be careful who sees this. As I drove to my next delivery, my mind raced. We weren't just seeking justice for Penny anymore. This was bigger, more dangerous, and suddenly more possible than I'd imagined. I called Penny that night. We're gonna need more help, I told her, and I think I know where to find it. Over the next 2 weeks, our small resistance grew. Zola connected us with former employees scattered across 3 counties. Each had a story, each had evidence, each had been silenced, until now. Theo from maintenance, who'd been ordered to bypass safety valves on industrial equipment. Imani from shipping, who'd documented mishandled hazardous materials. Reese from testing, who'd kept copies of altered inspection reports. But the most valuable alliance came from someone still inside Woodland, Kit, a janitor who'd worked there for 20 years, invisible to management but with access to every room, every conversation. They're panicking about the conference. Kit told me during our clandestine meeting at a truck stop 50 miles from town. State inspectors are coming, industry bigwigs. They've got crews working overtime to create a Potemkin village. Kit slid a security badge across the table. This will get you into any room except executive offices, and I've mapped the camera blind spots. Our plan took shape. Document everything, gather witnesses, and create a moment so public that Woodland couldn't silence it. The safety conference would be their unveiling, just not the one they planned. But even as our network grew, so did the pressure. My grandmother's nursing home called about a payment issue. Her insurance had mysteriously denied coverage. My landlord received complaints about late-night business activities from my apartment. My car developed brake problems no mechanic could explain. Then came the warning. I returned from a delivery shift to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was taken, but my research was neatly stacked on the kitchen table. Research I'd kept only on a password-protected laptop. On top lay a note. Some fires burn those who start them. That night, huddled in a motel room I couldn't afford, I called Penny. They know, I whispered. They're watching us. Her voice was steady. Then we accelerate. The conference is in 10 days. We move now. It's too dangerous, I argued. They already tried to kill me, Vera, she interrupted. What more can they take? My career's gone. I'm living on my sister's couch. My son had to delay college. Her voice hardened. What about the next person they decide is a problem? Or the family whose home floods because of a faulty pump? How many people have to suffer before we stop them? I thought of Grandma Rose, who'd faced down school boards and angry parents to protect her students, who'd taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. Okay, I said finally, but we need to be smarter than they are. What we didn't realize was that Kent had already set his own counterplan in motion. One designed not just to discredit us, but to eliminate any threat permanently. The chess game had begun, and unlike Kent, we couldn't afford to sacrifice any pieces. 8 days before the conference, our first major obstacle emerged. Kit called me at 3 a.m., voice tight with panic. They're installing new security systems, keycard access to every external door, biometric scanners for sensitive areas. And they've hired external security for the conference, not the usual rent-a-cops. These guys look military. I paced my motel room, heart hammering. Can you get me the specifications? Already working on it. But there's more. They're doing background checks on all conference attendees. Anyone with Woodland connections in the last 5 years is being flagged. Our original plan, having our witnesses attend as industry representatives, was disintegrating. We'll adapt, I said, projecting confidence I didn't feel. Keep your head down, don't risk your position. After hanging up, I stared at the wall where I'd taped our timeline. Red markers slashed through each passing day, counting down to the conference. Our window was narrowing. I called an emergency meeting at Zola's cabin outside town, the only place we could gather without surveillance. 14 former employees crammed into her living room, faces drawn with exhaustion and worry. Theo, a burly maintenance worker with calloused hands, spoke first. My cousin works for the security company they hired. These guys don't mess around. If we try to force our way in, we won't, I interrupted. We'll be smarter. Imani leaned forward, her braids swinging. I've been monitoring their conference preparations. They're transforming the place, fresh paint, new equipment, temporary walls hiding the problematic areas. The presentation will showcase their state-of-the-art safety protocols. Reese, a former testing specialist, snorted. Safety protocols they've never actually implemented. What about the evidence? I asked Zola. The financial records? The falsified reports? Compiled and ready, she confirmed, but without access to the conference. The room fell silent. Weeks of planning, evidence gathering, and risk-taking, all potentially wasted. Then Penny spoke from the video call on my laptop. She couldn't risk returning to town, but her voice filled the room. What's the one thing they can't control on conference day? We looked at each other blankly. The weather, she said simply. Outside, thunder rumbled as if on cue. July in the Midwest meant scorching temperatures, but also violent storms that could arise without warning. The building's climate control, I said slowly, understanding dawning. If it failed during the conference. Theo's eyes widened. The backup generators only cover emergency lighting and critical operations, not air conditioning. With outdoor temperatures forecasted at 95 degrees that day, Penny continued, and hundreds of bodies in an enclosed space. The temperature would soar, Reese finished, just like that storage room. A plan began forming, elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its symbolism. Make them feel what Penny felt. Create conditions they couldn't ignore or control. They hurt people by making them invisible, I said quietly. We'll make the invisible impossible to ignore. For the first time since we started, I saw genuine hope in their faces. But as we dispersed that night, none of us noticed the dark sedan parked half a mile down the road, its occupant speaking quietly into a phone. The next morning, I woke to frantic knocking. Reese stood at my motel door, face ashen. They got Kit, he said. Anonymous tip about stolen company property. Police searched his apartment this morning. My blood turned to ice. Did they find anything? No, Kit's too smart. But they fired him on the spot. And the message is clear. They're picking us off one by one. The loss of our inside connection was devastating. Without Kit, we had no eyes inside Woodland, no access to secure areas. Worse, Kent now knew exactly who was helping us. That afternoon, my grandmother called from the nursing home, her voice weak and confused. Vera, the nurse says I'm being transferred to a different facility. Tomorrow. Transferred to where? Someplace 3 hours away. They say my insurance changed. Pure rage flooded my system. They were targeting my grandmother, a frail 84-year-old woman, to get to me. I called the nursing home administrator, who apologetically confirmed the transfer. The authorization came directly from her insurance provider. Nothing we can do. The insurance company stonewalled me with bureaucratic excuses. By evening, I was sitting in my car outside Woodland Manufacturing, watching employees leave for the day, wondering which window belonged to Kent's office. My phone rang. Zola, don't do anything stupid, she said without preamble. We've got another way. They're going after my grandmother. I hissed. I know, and we'll fix it. But not by confronting Kent directly. That's exactly what he wants. You losing control, making threats he can use against you. She was right, but the knowledge did nothing to cool my rage. Come to my place, she insisted. Now. At Zola's cabin, I found Imani huddled over a laptop with a young man I didn't recognize. This is my brother, Leo, Imani explained. He works in health insurance software, and he has interesting news about your grandmother's policy change. However, Leo adjusted his glasses. The transfer authorization didn't come through normal channels. Someone accessed the system using administrative credentials and manually flagged her file. Can you reverse it? I asked. Already done, he said with a tight smile. And I've locked it from further changes while making it look like a system error. Your grandmother stays where she is. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by fresh worry. They'll just try something else. Which is why we're moving up our timeline, Zola said. The conference is 6 days away, but we make our move tomorrow. Tomorrow? I echoed. We're not ready. We don't have a choice, Imani said softly. Kent's not just trying to stop us now. He's sending a message about what happens to people who challenge him. And we need to send our own message, Zola added, starting with the most important piece of our plan. She handed me a sealed envelope. Your grandmother's transfer might have been stopped, but others won't be so lucky. Inside is a bus ticket to Millridge, 3 hours away. Someone's waiting to meet you there. Who? Someone who can finally make people listen. The bus arrived in Millridge just after noon the next day. Standing at the terminal, checking faces against the photograph Zola had given me, I finally spotted her, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Helen Braddock, she said, extending her hand. State Labor Department. My heart skipped. You're the one person in the regulatory system Kent Alvarez can't control or intimidate. She finished. I've been building a case against Woodland for 18 months. What I lack is first-hand witnesses willing to go on record. In a small cafe, I laid out everything. Penny's imprisonment, the falsified safety reports, the systematic elimination of whistleblowers, the defective equipment being shipped to hospitals and schools. Helen listened without interruption, taking meticulous notes. This matches my findings, she said finally. But testimony isn't enough. We need irrefutable evidence. We have documents, I said. Financial records showing money diverted from safety upgrades, altered inspection reports. And how did you obtain these documents? She asked pointedly. I hesitated, understanding the problem. Evidence gathered illegally might be inadmissible. I thought so, Helen said. Here's the reality. I can open a formal investigation, but Woodland will have time to cover their tracks. Their lawyers will tie us up for years while they continue operating. My heart sank. So we've risked everything for nothing? I didn't say that. A hint of steel entered her voice. The safety conference creates a unique opportunity. If violations were observed by outside witnesses, particularly state inspectors already present for the conference, that would change everything. The inspectors will only see what Woodland wants them to see, I argued. They've transformed the facility. Unless something forced them to look deeper. Helen leaned forward. Tell me about this plan your group has developed. I hesitated, then decided to trust her. I outlined our strategy to disable the climate control during the conference, forcing attendees to experience conditions similar to what Penny endured. Helen nodded slowly. Symbolic, but potentially effective. However, there's a missing piece. You need to ensure the right people see the right evidence at the right moment. How do we do that without access to the conference? That, Helen said with the first smile I'd seen from her, is where I come in. She slid a conference badge across the table. Chief Inspector, State Industrial Safety Board. I was already attending. Now, I'll be your eyes inside. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. There's something else you should know, Helen added, her expression darkening. Kent Alvarez isn't just creating hostile working conditions. The pumps Woodland manufactures are showing failure rates far above industry standards. 3 hospitals have reported emergency generator flooding from faulty pumps in the past year. The implications hit me like a physical blow. People could die. People already have, Helen corrected grimly. A nursing home in Laketon lost power during a heat wave when their backup generators flooded. 2 residents died before evacuation. I thought of my grandmother, of Penny trapped in that sweltering room. We're not just fighting for justice anymore, I whispered. We're preventing more deaths. Exactly. Helen gathered her notes. Your group has created the perfect opportunity. Now we need to ensure it exposes the full scope of what's happening at Woodland. As we parted, Helen gripped my arm. Be careful, Vera. Kent Alvarez has powerful friends and few scruples. This will get worse before it gets better. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove. 3 days before the conference, disaster struck. Theo, our maintenance expert who would disable the climate controls, didn't show for our final planning meeting. Calls went straight to voicemail. When Reese drove past his house, police cars filled the driveway. Manufacturing meth, Imani reported after making calls to contacts in law enforcement. They found a lab in his garage. That's impossible, I exploded. Theo wouldn't. Of course he wouldn't, Zola interrupted. But evidence can be planted, and Theo has a decade-old possession charge that makes the accusation sticky enough to hold him. Our plan was unraveling. Without Theo's expertise, the climate control sabotage, the centerpiece of our strategy, was in jeopardy. I can do it, Reese offered. Theo showed me the basics. Too risky, I countered. You don't have his experience. What choice do we have? Imani demanded. The conference is 3 days away. We've lost Kit and Theo. Kent is picking us off systematically. That night, alone in my motel room, I called Penny. Maybe we should stop, I said, exhaustion seeping into my voice. They're always one step ahead. Someone could get seriously hurt. Penny was silent so long I thought we'd lost connection. Do you remember what the doctor said? She finally asked. About what would have happened if you hadn't found me? Yes. I keep thinking about that. How close I came to dying in that room. How Drake would have gotten a call that his mother was found dead at work. How Kent would have manufactured some explanation. Her voice hardened. And I think about the next person who questions their practices, and the people using those faulty pumps. She was right. The cost of failure wasn't just our justice. It was future victims. We continue, I said with renewed resolve. But we need to change tactics. They're expecting us to target the conference from inside, so we work from outside. In the new plan that emerged, we wouldn't need access to the building's systems at all. Nature would do that for us. The weather forecast for conference day showed temperatures nearing 100 degrees with high humidity, dangerous heat by any standard. All we needed was to ensure the building's cooling systems failed at the right moment. The main transformer, Reese explained over a secure call. It's external to the building, feeds power to the cooling towers. If it overheated at peak load, how? I asked. Reflective panels, he said, positioned to focus additional solar heat on the transformer housing. With the system already straining against record temperatures, it wouldn't take much to push it over the edge. It was elegant, required no internal access, and couldn't be traced to sabotage. Just unfortunate positioning of temporary structures for the conference. But Kent wasn't finished with us yet. The morning before the conference, I woke to pounding on my door. Not police this time. Drake, Penny's son. Eyes wild with panic. Mom's been arrested, he gasped. Identity theft charges. They're saying she stole patient data from her last job before Woodland. Kent had played his trump card. With Penny in custody, the heart would go out of our resistance. Many might back out entirely. Drake handed me his phone with a text from Penny. Continue no matter what. This ends tomorrow. Conference day dawned scorching hot, the sun already brutal at 7 a.m. Our remaining team gathered at our staging point, a park overlooking Woodland manufacturing. Through binoculars, we could see attendees arriving, security checking credentials at every entrance. Everyone clear on their roles? I asked. Nods all around, faces grim but determined. Helen's inside, Zola confirmed. Positioned near the main conference hall with full access to the executive presentation room. Reese? He patted his bag. Reflective panels ready. I can place them without being seen from the security perimeter. Imani? Media contacts on standby. One call brings 3 news crews. And the evidence packets? Prepared and positioned. Zola confirmed. Ready for distribution the moment conditions are right. As they dispersed to their positions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. After weeks of reactive scrambling, we were finally taking the initiative. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. Kent would be welcoming attendees now, all corporate smiles and rehearsed warmth. By noon, the outdoor temperature would hit 97 degrees. By 1 p.m., when Kent was scheduled to present Woodland's industry-leading safety protocols, the building's interior would become unbearable. What Kent didn't know, what none of them knew, was that we weren't just creating discomfort, we were creating understanding. Sometimes, to make people care about invisible suffering, you have to make that suffering visible, and by day's end, no one would be able to look away. I positioned myself on the hill overlooking Woodland Manufacturing's main entrance, close enough to monitor the situation but far enough to avoid security. Through binoculars, I watched attendees filing into the gleaming glass building. Men and women in suits, carrying briefcases and conference folders, completely unaware they were walking into our carefully orchestrated revelation. My earpiece crackled. Reflective panels in position, Reese reported, angled perfectly. With this sun, the transformer should hit critical temperature around 12:30. Helen's in position, Zola added. Kent just welcomed everyone to the main hall. She says it's packed. Every state regulator and industry leader within 300 miles. I checked the outdoor temperature display on a nearby bank. 91 degrees Fahrenheit at 9:15 in the morning. The forecast promised at least 6 more degrees by midday. Any word on Penny? I asked. Her attorney is working on bail, Drake replied, his voice tight with worry. The charges are paper thin, but they're keeping her in holding until after the conference. Of course they were. Kent had planned this meticulously, removing our most compelling witness before his moment in the spotlight. What he hadn't counted on was our contingency planning. By 11 a.m., the conference was in full swing. Presentations on industry standards, vendor displays of safety equipment, networking over coffee and pastries. All in climate-controlled comfort while Kent worked the room, shaking hands, playing the role of safety advocate. At 11:47, Reese's voice came through my earpiece. Transformer temperature rising faster than expected. This heat is unreal. I scanned the cloudless sky. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, the kind of heat that shimmers above asphalt and makes breathing feel like work. How long? I asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. I relayed this to our team members stationed around the perimeter. Everyone ready? Affirmations came through one by one. We'd positioned our people at every exit, ready to guide conference attendees to our evidence station once the inevitable evacuation began. At 12:09 it happened. The main transformer made a sound like distant thunder, then went silent. Immediately, the building's emergency lights flickered on, but as predicted, the climate control system shut down completely. Through my binoculars, I watched confusion spread through the lobby. Security personnel rushed outside to check the transformer, finding nothing more suspicious than sun-baked equipment on the hottest day of summer. Helen reports the temperature is already climbing in the main hall, Zola said. Kent is assuring everyone they'll have power restored momentarily. Now came the waiting game. Inside that building, hundreds of professionals in business attire were about to experience what Penny had endured for 17 hours. The difference? They could leave any time. She couldn't. By 12:45, we could see people loosening ties, removing jackets. Windows were opened, but the breezeless day offered no relief. Staff distributed water bottles, but supplies quickly dwindled. Interior temperature has hit 85 degrees, Helen reported through Zola. Kent's insisting they continue with the program. He doesn't want to postpone his keynote. Of course he didn't. The keynote was his crowning achievement, ICC, proof of his leadership to industry peers and superiors. He'd sacrifice comfort rather than surrender his moment. By 1:15, the situation inside deteriorated rapidly. Through binoculars, I watched red-faced attendees fanning themselves with programs. Kent took the stage, sweat darkening his shirt, still smiling that plastic smile. Helen says it's 91 degrees inside now, Zola reported. Someone just asked to move the presentation outside. Kent refused. I checked the outdoor temperature, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside that sealed building, with hundreds of bodies generating additional heat, conditions were becoming dangerous. At 1:32, the first person collapsed, an elderly inspector overcome by heat. Medical personnel rushed forward, but in the crowded, overheated room, they struggled to reach him. "Now," I said into my communicator. "Imani, call your media contacts. Everyone else to positions." Kent tried maintaining control, directing attendees to remain seated, promising the power would return any moment. But as a second person showed signs of heat distress, the exodus began. Security couldn't contain it. Hundreds of overheated professionals streaming toward exits, seeking relief. As they emerged into the scorching parking lot, our team members were waiting, not with protests or accusations, but with cold water, portable fans, and simple directions. Relief stations set up in the shade across the street. Under canopies in the park opposite Woodland, we'd arranged water stations, seating, and large fans powered by portable generators. Immediate relief from the sweltering conditions. And beside each station, documentation tables. As the conference attendees gratefully accepted water and cooling, they found themselves surrounded by evidence of Woodland's malfeasance, testimony transcripts, financial records showing diverted safety funds, photographs of defective equipment installed in hospitals and schools, medical reports from injured employees, and most damning of all, a large display showing Penny's medical records from the day I found her, alongside the storage room temperature logs and security footage showing Kent locking the door. Helen Braddock moved through the crowd, no longer just an observer but directing state inspectors to specific evidence. Media vans pulled up, cameras capturing the scene of disheveled industry leaders and regulators, reviewing damning documentation, while Woodland executives watched helplessly from across the street. Through my binoculars, I found Kent standing at the building entrance, face contorted with fury as he realized what was happening. When he spotted news cameras, he retreated inside. "He's running," I said into my communicator, "probably heading for his office to destroy records." "No, he's not." Helen's voice came through clearly now. "I've got state police securing all executive offices. No one enters until we complete our inspection." The temperature continued climbing. By 2 p.m., the outdoor thermometer read 99 Fahrenheit. Inside Woodland's main hall, where some attendees and staff remained, temperatures approached 105 Fahrenheit. Almost exactly what Penny had endured. That's when we unveiled our final element. A large screen activated at our relief station, showing a pre-recorded video of Penny, calm, professional, sitting at a desk with documents visible. "My name is Penelope Merritt," her voice rang out over the crowd. "Until recently, I was a quality control specialist at Woodland Manufacturing. What you're experiencing today, this heat, this discomfort, is what I endured for 17 hours after discovering falsified safety reports." The crowd fell silent. Water bottles paused midway to lips, all eyes on the screen. Woodland Manufacturing has systematically endangered lives by cutting safety measures and silencing employees who speak up, Penny continued. The equipment they produce protects critical infrastructure, hospitals, nursing homes, schools. When it fails, people die. She held up documents, explaining each one in clear, precise language, the technical violations, the covered-up failures, the retribution against whistleblowers. "The temperature you're feeling right now," she concluded, "is the same temperature I was locked in for discovering these violations. The difference? You can leave. I couldn't. And the people depending on Woodland's equipment can't escape the consequences of their negligence either." As her video ended, the real power of our plan became evident. We hadn't just created discomfort, we'd created understanding. Every person there had physically experienced a fraction of what Penny endured. The heat had made abstract concerns visceral and immediate. Across the street, Woodland executives huddled in panicked conversation. Several state inspectors were already entering the building, Helen Braddock directing them to specific areas we'd identified. My earpiece crackled. "Vera, you need to see this." I turned my binoculars toward the main entrance. A police car had pulled up, and officers were escorting someone inside, not taking someone away, bringing someone in. My heart leaped. Penny. Her attorney had secured her release. "Let's finish this," I said, descending from my observation point. By the time I crossed to our relief station, the scene had transformed. What began as a simple cooling area was now an impromptu investigation headquarters. State officials interviewed former employees. Inspectors examined documentation. Reporters captured it all. I found Zola directing people to specific evidence stations. The Industrial Safety Board just declared an emergency suspension of operations. She told me, eyes bright with vindication. Helen fast-tracked it. Woodland is shut down pending full investigation. Kent, barricaded in his office, refusing to come out. As if summoned by his name, a commotion erupted at the building entrance. Kent emerged, flanked by security, attempting to push through to his car. His face was flushed, tie askew, the composed executive persona completely shattered. He froze when he saw the media. Then his eyes found me in the crowd. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the distance. His expressions cycled through shock, rage, and finally, fear. That's when Penny stepped into his path. The parking lot fell silent. Here was the woman from the video, the one whose suffering they'd just symbolically shared, standing face to face with the man responsible. Kent recovered quickly, corporate mask sliding back into place. Penelope, I see the misunderstanding about your identity theft charges has been cleared up. No misunderstanding, Kent, she replied, voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Just one more attempt to silence someone who knew too much. These accusations are groundless, he said loudly, aware of the cameras now trained on him. Woodland Manufacturing has an exemplary safety record. It's 105 degrees in your conference hall right now. Penny interrupted. Exactly the temperature you locked me in for 17 hours. How does it feel, Kent? Unbearable after just 3 hours, isn't it? His composure cracked. I never locked you anywhere. You're making accusations without proof. We have the security footage, Helen Braddock said, stepping forward, and sworn statements from 15 former employees documenting systematic safety violations and retribution against whistleblowers. Kent's eyes darted around, looking for allies, finding none. Even his own security staff had stepped back, creating distance. My attorney will. Your attorney will be very busy, Helen cut in. The state has opened a criminal investigation into willful negligence resulting in death. Those nursing home residents who died when your faulty pumps failed? We have the inspection records showing you shipped that equipment despite failed safety tests. The color drained from Kent's face. This was no longer about workplace harassment or corporate misconduct. This was manslaughter. As state police officers approached him, Kent made one last desperate attempt. This was a setup. They sabotaged the power to create this situation. Helen stepped closer. The transformer overheated due to record temperatures and poor maintenance. Another safety violation we've documented. Your own staff confirmed the maintenance schedule was altered to cut costs. I watched as Kent was escorted to a police car, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him, not with dramatic confrontations or violent retribution, but with something far more powerful. Hafen, the simple, irrefutable exposure of truth. In the days that followed, the full impact of our action unfolded like a wave spreading outward. State investigators uncovered violations far beyond what even we had documented. 3 executives were indicted for criminal negligence. Woodland Manufacturing was placed under state supervision, its leadership removed. Kent faced multiple criminal charges, not just for his treatment of employees, but for knowingly allowing defective safety equipment to be installed in critical facilities. The story spread nationwide. Other workers at similar companies came forward with their own accounts of safety violations and retribution. Regulatory agencies launched investigations into industry-wide practices. For us, the aftermath brought both vindication and healing. Penny's identity theft charges were dismissed with prejudice. Theo was released, the manufacturing charges exposed as fabrication. Former employees were offered reinstatement with back pay and damages. 1 month after the conference, I met Penny at a small cafe downtown. The same cafe where I'd once feared being seen with her, now the site of our victory celebration. Have you heard? She asked as I sat down. The state legislature is drafting new whistleblower protections. They're calling it the Woodland Act. I smiled. Appropriate naming. Helen called this morning, Penny continued. She's been appointed to head a new division focusing on industrial safety compliance. She's offering positions to those of us who helped expose Woodland. Are you going to accept? Penny nodded. Drake starts college next month. Full scholarship. Turns out exposing corporate corruption makes for a compelling admissions essay. We laughed. The sound, light and unfamiliar after months of tension and fear. What about you? She asked. Any regrets? I considered the question. The risks we'd taken. The fear we'd lived with. The system we'd challenged. Not one, I answered truthfully. We didn't just get justice for ourselves. We prevented more people from being hurt. As we sat there, I realized something profound had shifted, not just in the regulatory landscape or in corporate accountability, but in me. Grandma Rose had taught me to stand up for what's right, but I'd never truly understood the cost or the power of that stance until now. Kent had weaponized the very systems meant to protect people: employment, healthcare, law enforcement. He'd calculated that most people would accept injustice rather than risk everything fighting it. His one miscalculation? He hurt someone who refused to stay invisible. I looked at Penny across the table, her face no longer drawn with fear but alight with purpose. We should document what happened, I suggested, how a group of ordinary people stood up to corporate power and won. Others might need the blueprint. I think that's an excellent idea, she agreed. People need to know they're not powerless. And that's why I'm sharing this story now, not just as a record of what happened that scorching summer, but as a reminder that systems of power depend on our silence and isolation to continue unchecked. Sometimes justice requires more than filing complaints or following procedures. Sometimes it requires creativity, courage, and the willingness to make the invisible suffering visible to those who can stop it. If you're facing your own Kent Alvarez, someone abusing power while counting on your silence, remember our story. Find your allies, gather your evidence, and create your moment when the truth can't be ignored. Because in the end, that's how change happens. Not all at once, but person by person, standing up and saying, "This stops now." If our story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences standing up to workplace injustice, and subscribe for more real stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. Because the most important lesson we learned, we were never actually powerless. We just needed to discover our power together. Your position is being eliminated. Accept this entry-level role or leave. The HR representative stared at the wall behind me, not even granting me the dignity of eye contact. 20 years of my life, reduced to a 15-minute meeting where they couldn't even look at me. My throat tightened. Can I have until tomorrow? My voice barely audible as I thought about the mortgage payment due in 3 days. For 2 decades, I had poured everything into growing the firm's client portfolio. While colleagues attended their children's recitals and weekend getaways, I stayed behind, cultivating relationships with high-value prospects. My dedication transformed a struggling regional firm into an industry leader. Every holiday season, executives celebrated record profits I had directly secured. That evening, a former coworker sent me a message. Heard about what happened. For your information, your position wasn't eliminated. The CEO's nephew starts Monday. Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into the most satisfying professional revenge of my career, I want to be clear about something. What you're about to hear isn't just another workplace drama. It's a masterclass in recognizing your own value when others fail to. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or cast aside despite your dedication, this story is for you. Listen until the end because the strategy I used didn't just restore my dignity, it completely transformed the power dynamic in ways nobody saw coming. And if you're enjoying our stories but haven't hit the like and subscribe buttons yet, please take a moment to do so. Your support ensures you won't miss any of our future uploads where real people share how they reclaimed their power in extraordinary ways. My name is Everly Quinn. For those who know me professionally, I've always been the problem solver, the one who could smooth over any client concern with a mixture of analytical thinking and genuine relationship building. I built my reputation on delivering results without drama, finding solutions where others saw dead ends. My colleagues used to joke that I could convince a fish to buy swimming lessons, but it wasn't charisma that built my success. It was genuine care for my clients' needs, combined with a work ethic that never allowed me to give less than my absolute best. Outside of work, I lived a deliberately simple life. My small lakeside home, with its overgrown garden and collection of mismatched teacups, was my sanctuary. I never married, not because I didn't want to, but because the right relationship never seemed worth sacrificing the career I'd built. Besides, I had my rescue dog Winston, who greeted me every evening as if I were returning from war rather than an office 10 miles away. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious as weeks passed. Meeting invitations that somehow missed my inbox. Strategic discussions relocated to impromptu golf outings. Client information requests that bypassed my desk despite my history with the accounts. But when you've built your identity around a company for 20 years, denial becomes a powerful force. I chose to believe these were oversights, rather than orchestrated exclusions. The morning of my demotion began like any other. I arrived at 7 a.m., 2 hours before most of the staff, reviewing quarterly projections and preparing client presentations. My calendar showed a 10:30 meeting with Patrice from HR. Unusual, but I assumed it was about the health insurance changes that had been announced company-wide. When I entered the small conference room, Patrice wasn't alone. Our general counsel, a man I'd rarely spoken with despite our long tenure, sat beside her with a manila folder. Neither offered a handshake. After their bombshell announcement, I sat motionless, my mind racing through calculations. The entry-level position they offered came with a 62% pay cut. My mortgage, my mother's assisted living facility payments, even basic utilities would become impossible. This is happening regardless of your performance, Patrice added, as if this clarification offered comfort. The company is restructuring. Restructuring typically involves advance notice, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. Severance packages, transition periods. The general counsel cleared his throat. This is the transition period. We're offering you continued employment when we could simply terminate your position. I wanted to scream that 20 years of loyalty deserved more than this clinical disposal, but instead, I asked for 24 hours to consider their generous offer. Back at my desk, I noticed colleagues averting their eyes. News traveled fast. My computer access had already been restricted. I could no longer view client contracts or revenue forecasts. 2 decades of institutional knowledge, and they had already begun erasing my digital footprint. I maintained composure while collecting personal items from my desk, a plant I'd kept alive since my first year, a handwritten note from my first major client thanking me for saving their business. Small treasures that suddenly felt like artifacts from another life. In my car, the professional facade crumbled. I gripped the steering wheel, pressure building behind my eyes, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a strange clarity emerged. I reached for my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd never needed to use outside of scheduled quarterly meetings. Devin Aldridge, Chief Financial Officer at Midwestern Financial Partners, the $15 million account I had personally grown from a modest regional client to our company's crown jewel. Devin answered on the second ring. Everly? This is unexpected. Everything okay with the quarterly review preparations? I hesitated only briefly. Devin, I'm calling with a personal update. The company has eliminated my position, effective immediately. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. That's surprising, he finally said, his tone shifting to something more guarded. May I ask why? Restructuring was the official explanation. Another pause. Where are you right now? Sitting in my car in the company parking lot. Stay there. I'm finishing up a meeting across town. 20 minutes. I didn't question why the CFO of our largest client would drop everything to meet me. In 20 years of relationship building, Devin and I had developed something beyond the typical client representative dynamic. We'd navigated industry shifts together, collaborated on innovative solutions, and established a foundation of mutual respect. 23 minutes later, Devin's electric sedan pulled alongside my car. He gestured toward a coffee shop across the street. Inside, over untouched beverages, Devin revealed what I had suspected but couldn't confirm. My company had been positioning the CEO's nephew to take over my client relationships for months. They'd already arranged informal meetings with several key accounts, including Midwestern Financial. "He's bright enough," Devin said, "but completely green." During our lunch, he spent more time dropping names than asking about our needs. When I mentioned the custom reporting system you designed for us, he suggested we migrate to their standard platform to streamline operations. I felt a flicker of vindication. The reporting system Devin mentioned had taken me months to develop specifically for their unique regulatory requirements. It was one of many customizations I'd created to cement our relationship. "Here's what you need to know," Devin continued, leaning forward. "Our contract renews in 60 days. We've been approached by 3 of your competitors in the last month alone. The only reason we haven't entertained their proposals is because of the relationship we have with you." My mind raced with implications. "Devin, I appreciate that, but—" "Let me finish," he interrupted. "Midwestern is expanding. We're acquiring 2 regional institutions next quarter, which means our service needs will increase substantially. We've been discussing whether to expand our agreement with your firm or build in-house capacity." He paused. "I'd prefer a third option." "Which is?" "You, as an independent consultant, initially to manage the transition, but potentially longer term." I stared at him, processing the suggestion. "You want me to leave and take your business with me?" Devin shook his head. "I want to hire the person who's been instrumental to our success. The contract with your firm is a separate matter that our board will decide, with input from whoever is advising us during this critical expansion period." I thought about the mortgage payment looming, about 20 years of loyalty rewarded with a humiliating demotion, about the CEO's nephew stepping into relationships I had cultivated through countless early mornings and missed weekends. "I need to think about this," I said. Devin nodded. "Of course, but don't think too long. 60 days moves quickly." That evening, I sat on my back porch watching Winston chase shadows across the yard. The simple joy of his movements contrasted sharply with the complexity of my situation. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, some expressing genuine shock, others fishing for details they could relay through the office gossip network. One message stood out. Tamar, our receptionist who had started as an intern during my early years, wrote, "They've already moved someone into your office. Box from the fancy design store downtown." Nameplate reads, "Griffin Harding, Senior Client Director. Thought you should know." Griffin Harding, the CEO's nephew, now had a name and my title, with senior, added for good measure. I poured a glass of wine and considered my options. I could accept the entry-level position, swallowing my pride while searching for new opportunities. I could walk away with nothing but a 2-decade gap in my resume. Or I could take Devin's offer, effectively using my client relationship to establish myself independently. The third option felt like a betrayal of my professional principles. I had always prided myself on ethical conduct, on building success through service rather than manipulation. Using client relationships for personal gain seemed to cross a line I had never imagined approaching. But as night fell and I calculated how many months I could survive on my savings, something shifted in my perspective. The company had discarded 20 years of loyalty without hesitation. They had already begun erasing my contributions, rewriting the narrative of client relationships I had built. Was it really unethical to continue serving a client who valued my expertise, regardless of which company name appeared on my business card? By morning, I had made my decision, but not the one Devin expected. I arrived at the office at my usual early hour and sent a brief email accepting the entry-level position in the administrative department. Within minutes, I received confused responses from both HR and my former manager. This wasn't the outcome they had anticipated. They had expected, perhaps hoped for, an indignant resignation. When I arrived at my new desk in the administrative pool, the confusion was palpable. Younger employees whispered behind partitions, wondering why someone from upper management would accept such a demotion. My new supervisor, a woman 15 years my junior, awkwardly explained my reduced responsibilities with frequent reassurances that I probably already know this, but procedure requires I explain it. My strategy was simple: visibility and information. The entry-level position gave me legitimate access to the building, to basic company systems, and most importantly, to observe. I needed to understand exactly how Griffin Harding would approach the Midwestern financial relationship before making my next move. I called Devin that afternoon. "I've decided to accept your consulting offer," I told him, "but I'm also staying at the firm in a different capacity for now." "That's unusual," he replied, clearly surprised. "May I ask why?" "To ensure a proper transition," I said. "Midwestern deserves continuity of service. I want to make certain your needs are fully communicated to my replacement." Devin's tone suggested he didn't entirely believe this explanation, but he didn't press further. "And when would you begin consulting with us?" "I could start providing independent advisory services immediately, after hours. We'd need to be careful about potential conflicts of interest, of course." "Of course," Devin agreed, a new note of respect in his voice. He recognized strategy when he heard it. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a carefully compartmentalized existence. During the day, I performed basic administrative tasks with meticulous attention to detail. I arrived early, stayed late, and maintained a pleasant, helpful demeanor that confused those who had expected resentment. After hours, I met with Devin and his team to develop a comprehensive analysis of their current service agreement. I created detailed documentation of every customization, every workaround, every special arrangement I had implemented over the years, knowledge that existed primarily in my head, and scattered notes rather than formal company documentation. Meanwhile, I observed Griffin Harding's approach to client management. He was exactly as Devin had described, confident but inexperienced, more focused on impressing than understanding. He made swift decisions to modernize processes without grasping their purpose. He scheduled client meetings during their busiest operational periods. He dismissed concerns raised by account team members who had worked alongside me for years. Most critically, he began dismantling the custom reporting system I had built for Midwestern Financial, insisting that transitioning to the standard platform would showcase our newest features and streamline their experience. What he failed to understand, what nobody had documented because it had evolved organically through my relationship with Devin's team, was that Midwestern operated under unique regulatory requirements due to their particular mix of financial products. The custom system wasn't a preference, it was a necessity for their compliance protocols. When the system transition began causing data inconsistencies, Griffin dismissed them as temporary migration issues rather than fundamental incompatibilities. The account team, now reporting to him, tried to raise concerns, but were overruled. 4 weeks into my demotion, Devin requested an urgent meeting with company leadership to address serious concerns about service quality. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at 9 a.m. Griffin appeared unconcerned, assuring everyone that clients always get nervous during transitions and that he would smooth things over. That Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected meeting invitation from our CEO's assistant. The calendar item simply read, "Midwestern Financial Discussion," with my name alongside Griffin's and the executive team. Someone had finally remembered that I might have relevant knowledge about our largest account. I spent the weekend preparing, not for the meeting as they expected, but for what would come after. I reviewed my consulting agreement with Devin, confirmed that my non-compete only covered direct competitors rather than clients, and finalized my recommendation for Midwestern's service restructuring. Monday morning arrived with the particular tension that accompanies high-stakes meetings. I selected my outfit carefully, professional but not presumptuous. When I arrived at the executive conference room, conversations stopped abruptly. The CEO's expression flickered between confusion and annoyance at my presence. "Everly," he acknowledged with a nod that suggested I should explain myself. "I received an invitation," I replied simply, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Before he could respond, Devin entered with Midwestern's General Counsel and Chief Operating Officer. The energy in the room shifted immediately, as everyone recognized the seriousness of 3 C-suite executives attending what should have been a routine client meeting. After brief introductions, Devin opened with devastating clarity. "We've asked for this meeting to address significant concerns about our service relationship. Over the past month, we've experienced multiple system failures, missed regulatory reporting deadlines, and a concerning lack of responsiveness to our inquiries. Griffin immediately began offering reassurances, but Devon continued without acknowledgement. More troubling than these technical issues is the apparent loss of institutional knowledge about our specific needs. The custom reporting framework that was essential to our compliance protocols has been dismantled without adequate replacement. Our CEO leaned forward. Griffin has been implementing our newest enterprise platform, which offers enhanced capabilities beyond the legacy systems. There are always adjustment periods during upgrades. Devon's expression remained impassive. We weren't informed of any planned upgrades to systems that were functioning correctly for our purposes. Sometimes we need to modernize even when existing systems appear adequate. Griffin interjected with the confident tone of someone repeating a business school maxim. Devon finally turned to acknowledge him directly. Mr. Harding, the systems in question were modern. They were custom designed for our specific regulatory requirements by someone who took the time to understand our business. He shifted his gaze toward me at the end of the table. Isn't that right, Everly? All eyes turned to me. 20 years of professional restraint had prepared me for this moment. I spoke without emotion, presenting only facts. The reporting system was updated quarterly to accommodate regulatory changes. Its architecture was actually more advanced than our standard platform in several aspects, particularly in how it handled multi-jurisdictional compliance flagging. The CEO's expression tightened. If you had concerns about the transition, you should have raised them through proper channels. With all due respect, I replied, my role no longer includes client system oversight. I wasn't consulted about the changes. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Devon used the moment to slide folders across the table to each executive. We've prepared a detailed assessment of our current service agreement and identified several areas where we believe adjustments are necessary, he stated. Given recent events, we've concluded that the current arrangement no longer serves our needs. The CEO's face paled as he scanned the document's executive summary. This represents a significant restructuring of our relationship. Yes, Devon confirmed. We're unbundling several services that we believe we can manage more effectively through other means. What Devon didn't explicitly state, what was buried in the detailed appendices, was that these other means included a consulting agreement with me to rebuild and maintain the custom systems that had been dismantled at a fraction of what the company had been charging for bundled services. Griffin flipped frantically through the pages. But these changes would reduce the contract value by nearly 40%. Devon nodded. We believe that accurately reflects the value proposition under the current service model. As the implications sank in, the CEO's gaze shifted between Devon and me, calculation visible behind his eyes. Perhaps we've been hasty in some of our transition decisions. Everly clearly has valuable institutional knowledge about your needs. We could consider reinstating her previous role to ensure continuity. It was the opening I had anticipated, the moment when they would attempt to use me to salvage the relationship. Devon glanced my way, the question evident in his expression. Was this what I had been waiting for? A restoration of my position? I maintained neutral composure. That's a generous offer, but I believe my current role in administration is where the company has determined I can best contribute. The confusion on the executives' faces was momentarily satisfying. They had expected eagerness to reclaim my former status, not this passive resistance. Devon continued smoothly. We've already developed alternative arrangements for the unbundled services. We're prepared to maintain a relationship with your firm, but on these revised terms. The meeting concluded with tentative agreement to review the proposed changes, but the damage was done. As executives huddled in concerned groups afterward, I quietly returned to my administrative desk. By day's end, the ripples had spread throughout the company. The potential loss of 40% of our largest accounts revenue had triggered panic among leadership. The CEO's assistant requested a private meeting for the following morning. I had expected an offer to restore my position. Instead, I received something more revealing. The situation with Midwestern is unfortunate, the CEO began, seated behind his imposing desk. Griffin perhaps moved too quickly with system changes, but that's correctable. What concerns me is the timing of these issues coinciding with your transition. I kept my expression neutral. I'm not sure I understand. Devin Aldridge specifically requested your presence in yesterday's meeting. He referenced systems you designed. The restructuring proposal contains technical specifications that mirror your work. His eyes narrowed. Have you been communicating with Midwestern outside of company channels? As I mentioned during my transition, I've always maintained professional relationships with our clients. I replied evenly. Devin reached out after hearing about my position change, which is natural given our long professional history. The CEO leaned back, studying me. And the consulting arrangement referenced in Appendix C of their proposal? The one where they plan to hire an independent advisor to rebuild systems we're currently charging them premium rates for? I met his gaze directly. I wasn't aware of the specific details in their proposal. As you know, my system access is now limited to administrative functions. He didn't believe me. That much was clear from his expression. But he also couldn't prove anything improper. My consulting agreement with Devin had been carefully structured to begin officially after Midwestern's contract revision was finalized. Everly, his tone softened into something resembling sincerity. We've worked together for many years. I've always respected your contributions. Perhaps we acted hastily with the restructuring. Your institutional knowledge is clearly valuable. What would it take to resolve this situation amicably? The question hung between us. This was the negotiation I had anticipated, but the timing surprised me. I had expected them to try salvaging the Midwestern relationship first before approaching me with concessions. I'm not sure what you're asking, I responded, maintaining my careful neutrality. He sighed with theatrical weariness. Let's be direct. You built the Midwestern relationship. They trust you. We need that relationship to continue as it has been. Name your terms. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine accepting his offer. A restored position, perhaps with a grander title and increased compensation. The satisfaction of walking back through the office with my status not just returned, but elevated. But then I remembered sitting across from Patrice and the general counsel, being told my 20 years meant nothing. I remembered the CEO's nephew moving into my office before I'd even cleared my personal items. I remembered 2 decades of missed family gatherings, of working through pneumonia, of answering client calls on Christmas morning. I appreciate the conversation, I said, rising from my chair, but I should return to my duties. The quarterly supply inventory is due by end of day. His face registered genuine shock. You're turning down the opportunity to reclaim your position? I'm honoring the company's original decision about where my skills are best utilized, I replied. If there's nothing else, I should get back to those inventory spreadsheets. I left him staring after me, visibly struggling to comprehend my refusal. It wasn't the reaction of someone who had been plotting revenge. It was something far more confusing to him. Indifference. The next 2 weeks unfolded with increasing tension throughout the company. Midwestern's contract revision moved forward despite desperate countermeasures. Griffin launched multiple initiatives to prove the value of our standard systems, each one undermined by his fundamental misunderstanding of Midwestern's regulatory requirements. Meanwhile, I performed my administrative duties with quiet precision. I accepted lunch invitations from former team members who suddenly remembered my existence. I provided factual responses when asked about Midwestern's technical needs, never volunteering information but never withholding it when directly questioned. My evening hours were spent preparing for my next chapter. Devin and I finalized the consulting framework that would allow Midwestern to reduce their service costs by 40% while maintaining all critical functions. The arrangement would provide me income comparable to my former position while requiring fewer hours, a more balanced life than I'd known in 20 years. 3 days before Midwestern's contract decision deadline, Griffin appeared at my administrative workstation. His confident demeanor had acquired a desperate edge over recent weeks. I need your help with Midwestern, he stated without preamble. I looked up from my monitor. How can I assist? The reporting system you built, their technical team keeps referencing customizations that aren't documented anywhere. We need to replicate those functions in the standard platform before their board meeting on Friday. I had anticipated this moment. I'd be happy to explain the system architecture. When would you like to discuss it? Relief washed over his features. Now, if possible, I've reserved a conference room. For the next 4 hours, I walked Griffin through the intricate system I had built over years. I explained every customization, every workaround, every special function designed specifically for Midwestern's unique requirements. I answered his increasingly frantic questions with patient clarity. What became evident to both of us was that these functions couldn't simply be replicated in the standard platform, not in 3 days, not in 3 weeks. The system I had built was the product of years of incremental adjustments based on deep understanding of the client's evolving needs. As our impromptu session concluded, Griffin's expression had transformed from desperate hope to resigned understanding. "You built all this yourself?" he asked quietly. "Over time, yes, with input from their compliance team." He shook his head slowly, and I dismantled it in 3 weeks. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him. He was young, ambitious, and clearly intelligent. His primary failing wasn't incompetence but inexperience, and the arrogance that often accompanies it. "Systems can be rebuilt," I offered, "with proper understanding of the requirements." He gathered his notes, exhaustion evident in his movements. "The board meeting is Friday. Even if I worked around the clock, there's no way to restore what they need by then." I nodded, neither confirming nor contradicting his assessment. As he reached the door, he paused. "Why did you agree to help me today? After everything that happened?" The question was sincere, perhaps the first genuine moment we'd shared. "Because you asked," I replied simply, "and because client needs have always been my priority." He studied me for a long moment before nodding once and departing. Thursday evening, I received an unexpected call from the CEO. "Midwestern's board meets tomorrow morning," he began without greeting. "Griffin tells me you've been helpful explaining the technical requirements, but we're still facing a significant contract reduction." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied. "We've prepared a counter-proposal. Full restoration of your previous position, with a substantial increase in compensation and authority. Director level with equity participation." He paused. "In exchange for your active intervention with Midwestern, convince them to maintain the full service agreement." It was more than I had expected, significantly more. The equity offer alone represented financial security I had never achieved despite my years of service. "That's very generous," I acknowledged. "We value loyalty, Everly. Your knowledge is irreplaceable." The irony of his statement was almost painful. "And Griffin?" "He'll remain in a senior position, focusing on new business development rather than existing account management." I considered the offer carefully. It represented everything I had worked toward for 20 years: recognition, authority, financial security. All I needed to do was convince Devin to continue overpaying for bundled services his company didn't need. "I appreciate the offer," I said finally, "but I don't believe I can influence Midwestern's decision at this point. Their analysis of service needs appears quite thorough." Silence stretched across the line. When he spoke again, his tone had hardened. "I see. Then I wish you luck with your future endeavors, whatever they may be." The implied threat was clear, but it held no power over me anymore. My administrative position had always been temporary, a means to an end rather than a destination. Friday morning, I submitted my resignation effective immediately. I cleared my few personal items from the administrative desk and walked through the lobby one final time. Tamar, the receptionist, gave me a knowing smile as I passed. "They're all in the executive conference room," she whispered. "Midwestern's board decision is being delivered by video call." I nodded my thanks and continued toward the exit, stepping into the bright spring morning with a curious lightness. For the first time in 20 years, I had nowhere specific I needed to be. I drove to the lakeside park where this journey had begun 5 weeks earlier. The morning air carried the scent of new growth as I followed the walking path along the water. My phone remained silent in my pocket. I had removed company email from my personal device that morning. At precisely 10:30 a.m., when I knew the Midwestern board decision would be delivered, I sat on a bench overlooking the water and finally allowed myself to feel everything I had suppressed: the hurt of betrayal, the indignity of dismissal, the uncertainty of new beginnings. The emotions washed through me without diminishing my sense of clarity. My phone vibrated with a text message from Devin. Decision delivered. Call when you can. I gave myself another 30 minutes of peaceful solitude before making the call. It's official, Devin said when he answered. The board approved the revised service agreement, 40% reduction in overall fees with unbundled services as we discussed. How did they take it? I couldn't help asking. Devin chuckled. Not well. Your CEO tried to salvage things with a last-minute offer to restore the custom reporting system, but our technical team made it clear that the knowledge required had left the building. Quite literally, as it turns out. I smiled despite myself. And our consulting arrangement? Approved unanimously. You can start Monday if you're ready. Initial 6-month contract with option to extend or convert to permanent position. I'll be ready, I confirmed. The weeks that followed unfolded with a rhythm entirely different from my previous professional life. I worked directly with Midwestern's technical team to rebuild the custom reporting system, this time with comprehensive documentation and training materials to ensure institutional knowledge was properly preserved. The work was challenging and satisfying. More surprisingly, it rarely extended beyond reasonable hours. For the first time in decades, I found myself with evenings free to explore interests long set aside. I joined a community garden. I took Winston to weekend training classes. I reconnected with family members who had grown accustomed to my perpetual unavailability. 3 months into my consulting arrangement, Devin invited me to lunch at a restaurant overlooking the financial district. The wall of windows provided a clear view of my former employer's building among the downtown towers. The quarterly results were announced yesterday. Devin mentioned as our meals arrived. Your former company reported a 22% decline in revenue. Their stock dropped nearly 30 points in afternoon trading. I nodded, taking a sip of water. Not unexpected with the contract revision. What you might find interesting is that Griffin Harding resigned last week. Apparently, he's returning to graduate school. The news surprised me. That seems wise. He has potential with proper experience and perspective. Devin studied me curiously. You don't seem particularly satisfied by any of this. Most people would consider this the perfect revenge story. The undervalued employee who brought down the company that discarded her. I considered his assessment. That wasn't my goal. I simply recognized my own value when they failed to. And the 40% contract reduction that devastated their quarterly performance was based on an honest assessment of which services Midwestern actually needed. I replied. I would have recommended the same restructuring if I were still employed there, though I doubt anyone would have listened. Devin smiled. That's why our board approved your consulting arrangement without hesitation. Integrity is rare in this industry. As lunch concluded, Devin revealed the real purpose of our meeting. We've been discussing bringing the custom reporting system maintenance in-house permanently. The board has approved creating a new position, Director of Regulatory Systems. The role would report directly to me with a team of 4 technical specialists. You're offering me a permanent position, I observed. With compensation approximately double your former salary, given the critical nature of compliance systems in our industry. Plus actual work-life balance, we've noticed how much more efficiently you operate without the artificial pressure of 80-hour weeks. The offer was compelling in every aspect, yet I found myself hesitating. May I think about it? I asked. The consulting arrangement has provided flexibility I've never experienced professionally. Devin nodded. Take whatever time you need. The role was created with you in mind, but we understand if you prefer independence after your experience. That evening, sitting on my back porch watching Winston chase fireflies across the yard, I reflected on the journey of recent months. The company that had defined my professional identity for 20 years was struggling in my absence. The consulting work I now performed provided greater financial security with significantly less personal sacrifice. Midwestern's job offer represented the recognition and compensation I had always deserved. Yet the most profound change wasn't professional at all. It was the discovery that my value wasn't defined by a title or a company's assessment. The skills I had developed, the relationships I had built, the knowledge I had acquired, these belonged to me regardless of where I applied them. The revenge fantasy I had briefly entertained during those first painful days after my demotion now seemed oddly hollow. The company's struggling performance brought me no particular satisfaction. Griffin's resignation elicited more sympathy than triumph. Even the CEO's desperate final offer had felt more sad than vindicating. What satisfied me deeply was rebuilding my life on my own terms, creating boundaries that honored both my professional capabilities and my personal needs. The company had eliminated my position, but in doing so, they had inadvertently freed me from limitations I hadn't recognized. 1 week later, I accepted Midwestern's offer with negotiated modifications to preserve certain flexible work arrangements. The day I signed the contract, I drove past my former employer's building. The company logo still illuminated the upper floors, though rumors of downsizing and possible acquisition had begun circulating through industry channels. I felt no animosity as I glanced up at the familiar tower, only a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes losing what we think defines us creates space for discovering who we truly are. 6 months later, an industry newsletter reported that my former company had been acquired by a larger competitor. The CEO had stepped down to pursue other opportunities. The acquisition price represented a 50% devaluation from the previous year's market position. The article mentioned the unexpected loss of key client relationships as a contributing factor to the company's vulnerable position. A small photo accompanying the piece showed moving boxes being carried from the executive floor of the building where I had spent 2 decades of my life. When Devon forwarded me the article with a question mark as his only comment, I replied with simple honesty. Every company makes choices about what they truly value. Some learn too late that relationships and institutional knowledge can't be replaced by nepotism and titles. That evening, I hosted a dinner party, something I had never found time for during my former life. Colleagues from Midwestern mingled with neighbors and friends from my community garden. As conversation and laughter filled my small lakeside home, I realized that the most powerful form of reclaiming your value isn't found in revenge at all. It's found in creating a life that honors your worth when others fail to see it. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or cast aside despite your dedication and excellence, remember this: your value doesn't diminish based on someone's inability to see it. The most satisfying response to those who undervalue you isn't plotting elaborate revenge, it's building something better that they can't access. Have you ever experienced a professional betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now to find the courage to recognize their own worth. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Every week, we share authentic stories of people who found unexpected strength in their most challenging moments. Don't miss our next upload. Sometimes the stories that seem most ordinary contain the most extraordinary wisdom about reclaiming your power.